Okay, folks. Well, it is 6 o'clock, so we're going to call this meeting to order since we have a very full and busy agenda tonight. Good evening. I'm Noah Levy, Chair of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. And before we get started with tonight's meeting, as usual, I just want to call the attention of those who may be watching or listening remotely to the first 2 pages of our agenda, particularly the second page, which outlines the methods by which you can watch or participate remotely in our meetings. If you are at a computer, the best way to, and wish to participate, the best way to do that is by Zoom with the link provided on page 2. That way you're with us in real time and you can easily raise your hand and be seen. You can also participate by phone and unmute by pressing *6. If you're following on the humboldt.legstar.com web broadcast, just note that that runs perhaps a minute behind real time. So if you're wanting to call in and raise your hand, you'll just need to do that a little earlier than you might think. And with that, I would invite you to join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tripp, thank you so much for filling in tonight for Laura. And by the way, I just want to send Laura my best wishes on a speedy recovery. I know she's had health issues. Would you take a roll call of commissioners present, please?
Iris Gabdell.
Here.
Noah Levy.
Here.
Lonix Landry.
Here.
Thomas Mulder. Peggy O'Neill.
Here.
Brian Mitchell. And Sarah West.
Here.
Okay, we have 5 out of 7. That's a quorum. I have been notified that at least Commissioner Mulder will be here shortly. So we'll be sure to include that in the minutes when he does arrive. Item C is agenda modifications. Director Ford, do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
Yes, Chair Levy, we do. And I would like to ask the commission to pull item G, and I believe that's 2, the sign ordinance, and continue that to the meeting of December 14th. The reason for this request is just the length of tonight's agenda and realistically not being able to give that adequate time.
I appreciate that. And I understand that that the planner, Jacob Dunn, notified known interested parties in advance of this. So,
that is correct.
So perhaps we'll move that up to just after the consent calendar, just so we can take care of that up front.
Sure.
Okay. Any other agenda modifications or supplements you wanted to call out?
Well, there are a number of supplementals that are on the dais tonight. The first one is for item F1, the Valadeo subdivision. There's some letters for item H2, the Stoyanov special permit. And then there is a pile, I shouldn't say a pile, but there is a stack of public comments on the Valadeo subdivision.
Yep.
And then there are 2 additional comments that just came in tonight for Valadeo.
Okay, which I believe Tripp passed out the paper copies. So, okay.
And if I could, Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to allow Destiny Valeska to introduce herself remotely.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to state that unfortunately I have fallen ill on Tuesday and I was running a fever. So out of an abundance of caution, I'm social distancing for this meeting. I should be back November 30th, at least that's the hope. But I'm here, and if you guys have questions, just because you don't see me in the chair, I'm here, I'm listening. So I'll be ready to answer any questions.
thanks so much for being available even when you're not feeling well. Okay, and with that, I will acknowledge that Commissioner Mitchell has arrived, but I think Commissioner Mulder will be here in a minute, so maybe we'll just...
He's right there.
Oh, Commissioner Mulder is coming in now. So I don't know that we need to take another roll call, but Tripp, can you just enter in the action summary that Commissioners Mitchell and Mulder are now with us? Thank you so much. That brings us to item D, which is public comment on non-agenda items. This is the time for members either in the audience or on Zoom or phone to comment on a matter that pertains to the planning department or the jurisdiction of the planning commission, and is not one of the items already on our agenda tonight. You can have 3 minutes for that comment if you wish. Is there anyone here in the audience who wishes to comment on something not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Is there anyone on Zoom or phone wishing to make a comment on a matter not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing no hands in the room or on Zoom or phone, we will close that item of public comment and move to the consent agenda. As usual, I'm just going to go through these items on the consent agenda and see if any member of the commission or of the audience wishes to pull the item for a question or a discussion, rather than just being handled all as part of consent. The first item is VIPA Farmers, conditional use permit in the Salmon Creek area. That item, I just want to note, is recommended for continuance to November 30th, so we won't be taking any other action other than the continuance to the next meeting. So anyone wishing to comment on the continuance of that item? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll leave that on consent. Item 2 is the Panther Rock Growers and MBC project in the Dinsmore area. This is being recommended for approval. Is there anyone on the commission wishing to pull this for questions or discussion? Any members of the audience wishing to pull this one for questions or discussion? Seeing no hands in the room or on Zoom, we will leave Panther Rock Growers on consent. The third and final thing on consent is Barrett Farms LLC conditional use permit in the Dinsmore area. That is also being recommended for approval. Any commissioners wishing to pull that one? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on that item? Seeing no hands in the room or on Zoom, then all 3 items on consent can be moved forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the consent calendar 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner West. Any further discussion? If not, a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstain? Okay, the 3 items on consent are approved or moved forward as recommended. Now, before we get to the first public hearing, which will be the Valadeo subdivision in McKinleyville, I just want to very quickly take care of the matter that the director mentioned, which is that the sign ordinance, which is item G2, in consideration of how many other things we have to deal with tonight, they're asking us to continue that to not the next meeting, but 2 meetings hence, the December 14th meeting, correct? So I would entertain a motion, if commissioners don't object or wish to comment on the continuance of that item, then I would.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Mulder to continue the sign ordinance discussion to December 14th.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh.
Since it is a public hearing,
I should take public comment. You're right. Thank you for the reminder. Again, we're not planning to have a substantive discussion of the sign ordinance, but if there is anyone either in the room or on Zoom who wishes to make a comment on the sign ordinance or on our continuance of it, particularly if you're not sure you can attend the December 14th meeting, you absolutely have that right. Anyone in the room? Not seeing any hands. Anyone on Zoom or phone? Not seeing any hands there either. Thanks for the reminder. So with that, I will close public comment on the continuance of the sign ordinance. We have a motion and a second to continue it to December 14th. All in favor, would you join me for a voice vote? All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed or abstained? Okay, so by unanimous vote, the sign ordinance is continued until December 14th, not our next meeting, but the meeting after. And with that, happily, we still have most of the meeting left to get into the stuff that we are going to deal with. The first public hearing scheduled for tonight is the Valadeo Final Map Subdivision Conditional Use Permit and Planned Unit Development in the McKinleyville area. And I would welcome Mr. Lazar to give us a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Levy, members of the commission. Good evening. I am Steve Lazar. I'm assigned to this project. I'm going to share my screen in just a sec here.
Actually, Mr. Lazar, I think maybe I should, even at this point, before we hear your report, just make a brief ex parte disclosure. I did receive an invitation to visit the site and meet with the applicants of the Valadeo subdivision last week. And I spent about an hour there looking at the property, discussing it with them, actually speaking with one interested neighbor who happened to walk by. They answered a few questions, and I just wanted to share that.
I just wanted to also disclose I was also out at the site and spoke with neighboring community members as well as the project applicants, and had an opportunity to look at the sidewalks and roads that we've been hearing a lot of public comments about. Thank you.
I'll also disclose I did a site drive-by on both Pickett and Gwen, and but did not speak with any residents or the applicant.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all. With that, go ahead, Steve, when you're ready.
Thank you. So I prepared a PowerPoint for tonight to try to go through a number of the issues that we've heard about in the public comments received to date. This was originally set to appear before you at your last meeting and was continued at the request of the applicant. Okay, hopefully now I should be able to see my screen. Oh, sorry, thank you. Maybe. Okay. Okay, thanks. So as the chair indicated at the start of the hearing, this is a final map subdivision, conditional use permit, and plan development permit, 3 different entitlements. The project is located in the McKinleyville area, in central McKinleyville. It is a parcel that abuts 2 different roads, Pickett Road, a county-maintained road, and Gwen Road, a private road. It's on the east side of Central Avenue, and the parcel is approximately 2.5 acres in size. From a land use and zoning perspective, it's zoned and planned for multifamily. On the slide here, this is the parcel in question. It's been zoned for multifamily for quite some time. The density starts at a lower level of 7 units per acre with a maximum density of 30 units per acre, with a floor area ratio of 1 and a minimum parcel size. Oops. Thanks. Minimum parcel size of 5,000 square feet. That minimum parcel size is going to be adjusted under the planned development concept, which allows flexibility in parcel sizes and other matters. When I say the R3 zoning, you can see some of the salient restrictions or requirements of the zone. There's a 45-foot height limit, a 60% lot coverage, and then there's a number of different uses that are allowed on parcels in the R3 zoning, but duplexes and fourplexes are principally permitted. And conditionally permitted uses include one-family dwellings like we have before us tonight. However, because of the significance or the importance of the multifamily zones, through subsequent or previous amendments to our housing element, we've put in language to guarantee that multifamily development wouldn't be precluded by single-family uses. So that is the principal and primary use for this zone. Looking at the general plan for a moment, we have sections here for your review from the county general plan and the McKinleyville community plan, which illustrate the kind of character of the land use designation. It's intended for areas with full urban services and where multiple family home development is appropriate. And once again, you can see the density range. This next slide is showing the historical map for the prior, sorry.
Could you speak just a little louder?
Oh, yeah.
I'm hearing that some people are having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So this slide that we see right now is from our old McKinleyville community plan that was superseded in 2002 with the newer McKinleyville plan that's in effect. But you can see the parcel in question has been planned and zoned for over 40 years for multifamily development. And you can see here I've circled the date of adoption of the prior community plan. There's a number of entitlements being sought: the final map subdivision for up to 19 parcels, the conditional use permit for 4 single-family homes on the west side or on the north side of the development, and a planned development permit, and a list of the things that they're looking to utilize in the PDP concept: the fluctuation in the minimum parcel size, the minimum lot width, the right-of-way width, and setbacks and shared parking facilities. In terms of the development itself, a breakdown here is provided. We have 4 single-family homes, 6 fourplexes that would be the townhome style with 2 bedrooms, 1-bedroom apartments that would also be in a 4-plex style. 32 of those units would result from that, and then the existing home that was occupied by the prior owner and is being retained, and then an accessory dwelling unit. So a total of 62 units would occur under the proposal, and 89 parking spaces are being provided. The height range from the different types of dwelling units, with 23 for the attached single-family homes on Pickett and 22 for the townhomes and 1-bedroom apartments. It's important to note that I think the applicant will be speaking to this tonight, that they may want some flexibility to go a little higher. Just depending on the roof pitch, it will set the height between 22 and 25 feet. This is showing the tentative map, and I've color-coded it to kind of break out the different types of development. So here you see the different colors, and then breaking out here by type. On the west or on the north side, you see Pickett. So north would be to the left in this view of the map. Then we have the 2-bedroom units that are in orange, and then the 1-bedroom units that are in green. And then we have the existing home that would remain, and the accessory dwelling unit that would remain on a central parcel. These are examples of the elevations provided by the applicant that were included with your packet. These are the 2-bedroom unit. These are the floor plans. The 2-bedroom units are a townhouse style where they're both floors are occupied by a single unit. The green, it was a little confusing, I think, in the staff report, and I want to make sure to illustrate this. The green ones are 1-bedroom units, and they're actually more of an 8-plex, but with a 0 lot line that divides one half of the 8-plex from the other. Technically, 8-plexes are not allowed in this zone. However, because the parcels will divide them into units of 4, it would comply with the 4-plex allowance in the R3 zoning. So here you can see the division here where the parcel line splits there would be a shared roof, but they would be,
Recording in progress.
there would be 2 different parcels with 4 units on each. Here looking at the, this would be the units that are abutting Pickett. They are, you'd be forgiven if you were looking at them on the ground of thinking they were a duplex, but again, a 0 lot line would result in each being a single family home on its own parcel. And I think I can see that there, kind of just to illustrate that. And then this is a view of the floor plan. So I'm going to move along now. One thing I want to get into is, it wasn't disclosed in the staff report, and I think some of the members of the public zeroed in on parking, and we want to go over that to give a comparison of how the number of spaces compared to the standards in the zoning regulations. So I have a breakout of the different types of parking requirements by the type of use. So it's not a uniform set. It's not per unit. It's per development type. So 1 and 2 family dwellings have a certain set of rules for how many parking spaces are required. Accessory dwelling units, the state has kind of intervened and exempted them from parking in many different cases, including the one we have tonight. And then with multifamily of 2 or more units, we have specific requirements based on the number of bedrooms per unit. All that said, when you look at the totals here, this table on the top of the screen here, I have the expected required parking by unit. And then the number of ones provided by parcel. And what you see is there's a delta between the required number, 122 using the zoning regulation formula, and 89, which is the number that is being provided under the proposal. And you can see the breakout per parcel here. You can see 8 spaces are on some lots, 9 spaces are on the center lot, 0 spaces here, and that kind of illustrates the planned development concept. There's going to be kind of shared parking throughout the development. But a total of 89 spaces are provided, and 122 would ordinarily be required. So before you tonight would be the need for an exception to be granted in order to allow the developer to deviate from the standards. And those standards are the floor. You can always provide more, but that's the way the zoning regulations work. We believe that the exception can be supported. In fact, we had public comments that suggest the parking was excessive. It's not, from a zoning standpoint. The zoning regulations require more parking than what's being provided, but there are a number of features that I think are important to keep in mind. So one is that there is public transit within close proximity to development. The public transit, also in addition to public transit, is grocery stores and other conveniences that are important. It would be entirely possible for someone to not own a car and be able to get around and so that's why part of the reason that multifamily zones are applied in places like this. Also, these are the findings that are included in the zoning regulations wherever an exception is granted, and the hearing officer has to make those findings when granting the exception. So the 3 that I've underlined are the ones that I think are the most relevant. The Gwynn property, the Gwynn property is the property being divided and developed. It was home to Liberta Gwynn until about 2018. It's not a historically designated structure, but Gwynn Road and the Gwynn estate is a big part of this area. So I think keeping that home provides a number of different benefits, and one could be seen as keeping something that grounds the historical context. Additionally, as I was mentioning earlier, it's very, very close to built-up urban areas, the Pearson Shopping Center, Central Avenue. And the levels of anticipated use, I think, is another finding that can be made. When you look at the density being sought versus the allowed density, it's 79% of the maximum density allowed under the land use designation. So at peak, it would be, I think, a total of 69 units that could be allowed on this parcel. Or sorry, no, 79 units, yeah. And that's using the gross lot size, sorry. And it would it would represent about a 28% reduction. The other important thing that I want to point out is if we go back to the tentative map, I think you can see it real quick. Okay, so on this parcel here, if I can get the cursor, there are parking spaces that are not shown by the developer on their tentative map. These parking spaces are existing spaces that serve the Gwynn residents and would not be lost by the proposal. If you visited the site, you might have seen it when you walk down G and you go into the gate. Those spaces would remain available. They're just not shown on the site plan. So I would estimate at least 4 spaces would be available in that area. Okay, so I'm going to move along here. So some of the things that we wanted to kind of frame for tonight's consideration, you received the supplemental, I'll get to that in a minute, but whenever requiring things of a developer in the context of this, you have to keep in mind the principles of nexus and proportionality. Nexus being there has to be a connection between what you're asking of the developer to the potential impacts or issues that arise there from a project, and the proportional concept of it can't be exceeding the impact that's being addressed. So there is an art to that, and it is nuanced, but those are important to keep in mind. One of the issues that we've heard public comment about is the issue of Gwynn Road being a private road that's not county maintained. The private nature of the road does create a gap in service and maintenance. We will, as a standard condition of the applicant, require that they attempt to form a road maintenance association. Through doing that, they have the ability to kind of galvanize the neighborhood and start setting a target for maintenance into the future. And that's an important exercise. You may want to require that they form a road maintenance association regardless of whether the neighborhood's willing to commit to joining it. Given that there's 17 parcels being created, each could potentially use Gwynn Road. Whether that's enough to ensure that that an amount of maintenance could be generated by the revenues collected by the participants from the association, that's kind of an issue that we don't have a great deal of clarity on. But I think that in the context of attempting to form it, that's a decision point. Should they attempt, and if nobody wants to join it, they're relieved of any further responsibility, or should it be a requirement that they form it regardless of whether the neighborhood joins in addition to the parcels? Also, things to keep in mind that the developers indicated a willingness to install speed bumps and crosswalks. Some of these things are subject to public works involvement and would require that certain criteria and design be met. And we don't have final plans at this juncture, so we can't require a specific design be implemented. But insofar as they're willing to do it, I think one thing to keep in mind is if the warrant can't be met for instance for a crosswalk, then it's outside of the developer's control. It's a public road on Pickett, and therefore Public Works could interfere with that if they felt like the crosswalk doesn't comply with. Sorry, I had to write it down. The Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Think of it like the building code for roads. It has specific rules of when and where you put things on a road. So those are things to keep in mind. You don't want to write conditions that are so inflexible that they put the developer in a catch-22 if they're not able to actually get buy-in or it doesn't marry well with the requirements and other rules that are outside of this, because we haven't nailed that down at this juncture. And then at last, I just want to remind the commission that the largest entitlement that's being sought tonight is the subdivision. However, multifamily development is principally permitted in the zone and would be allowed regardless of whether, even if the project were denied tonight, for instance, they could still pursue a similar development without anyone saying anything about it. So just that's something to keep in mind. So talking about the roads for a minute is important because the nature of Gwynn is private. And the reason for that is we have a series of subdivisions in this area where Gwynn wasn't utilized for access. The Grace Park subdivision was the earliest one. It was filed in a series of units between 1960 and 1985. It was then followed by the Parkview subdivision, which fronts along Stevens, which is further east of the parcel. The parcel's in yellow here. Also, those roads like Pickett and Stevens became public roads through those subdivision processes. And then lastly, Pillar Estates was the last map to be filed in a series of units, and that resulted in the creation of additional Gwynn east of the project site was made public up to Stevens. So if we look at those three together and then look at the public road network, you can see the consequence of all that is that we have public roads in yellow, but not including the full measure of Gwynn. And our colleagues in Public Works say that part of the reason that Gwynn wasn't accepted at that time of the subdivisions is that there were obstructions in the right-of-way, mobile homes that are kind of on the south unit of the Thunderbird Mobile Estates. So I wanted to just bring that up. This would be the number of parcels that could potentially be used in a road maintenance association, given that they all benefit from the use of Gwynn. I didn't count it out because some of them are, mobile home parks where you have many tenants, but you can see it's a considerable population, and hopefully the exercise in trying to get buy-in to a road maintenance association would be successful. And then lastly, I want to summarize some of the public comments we've received. There's been a lot of concern about, I think it's important to point out, we've had people in support of the project, also and opposed to it. The opposition largely clusters around concerns about compatibility, the density of development proposed. As I mentioned, it's been planned and zoned for over 40 years for this density. The tallness of the buildings, the height limit is 60 feet. It's considerably below the height limit. It's a 2-story development. It's hard to get to a density of the target we're talking about without going up. In terms of concerns about the additional traffic from the development on impacts on Gwynn Road, the developer in their letter that we provided to you has committed to taking all construction traffic on Pickett to help eliminate that from being a factor in road impacts. And then also concerns about pedestrian safety. And I have a series of slides that kind of go through the sidewalks. And then lastly, concerns about stormwater. I think it's important to note that this development is going to retain stormwater on site and discharge it on site. It won't be leaving unless it goes above the 100-year target. So it is going to create some logistics, and it's important to note there's some unique localized drainage issues because of the topography that will be further a challenge for the developer. However, in speaking with our colleagues in Public Works, they don't believe that it can't be accommodated, that there's a way to engineer it, but those details usually don't emerge until after a tentative map approval. So those will be things that are on the radar of Public Works that'll have to be tackled by the developer before the map can file and the development move forward. But it is something that is being addressed through the design. And then lastly, there's been a lot of concern, especially for folks in the Thunderbird Park, about the loss of safety and having 2-story development on their east side, and those are difficult to reconcile when you're dealing with multifamily of the sort we have. So I mentioned the supplemental. I won't go into too much more detail, but for the public's benefit, since it came late yesterday, the developer's committing to locating the mailboxes on the inside of the property to help eliminate queuing along Gwynn or Pickett, including locked bicycle storage at the lower level of the one-bedroom units. Like I said, restricting the construction traffic, completing the sidewalk network on the north side of Gwynn. That's one of the gaps in the network. And working with Public Works on traffic and pedestrian safety measures to include crosswalks, speed humps, and bulb outs. And we have 2 recommended conditions that were included with the supplemental to help clarify some support for the phased approach. We believe that's something that can be supported. The phased approach, to be clear, would allow for the 4 single-family units that would be along Pickett to be recorded as a single one first phase, with the remaining development all coming as a later second phase. Those would be the 2 phases. And then, so here's, speak real quickly about CEQA. This is a project located within a community planning area for which several environmental impact reports were prepared, one for the McKinleyville Community Plan back in 2002, and one more recently for the general plan in 2017, which means that there was analysis and consideration when continuing to apply the multifamily zoning and plan and density to these areas. The consideration was based on the network of roads, the available infrastructure, and the environmental concerns that would ordinarily arise. So given that, CEQA doesn't want agencies to go through unnecessary additional environmental review when there's been prior analysis, and that's that exemption, or that's not an exemption, that's why we're staying at citing this provision, 15183. So we are recommending approval. We believe that it qualifies based on the site suitability standards and the planned unit development concept, and is consistent with plan development for this area. I think the next series of slides are photos that I'm going to go through very quickly. So this is the existing residence that Liberta Gwynn lived in that will be retained. This is a view of the yard looking towards the northwest. Here you can see some of the mobile homes from the park that are on the fence line. This is a view towards Gwynn. This would be areas of development. This here, kind of, you can imagine here with this fence line what it might look like with two-story development along, this is the boundary between the mobile home park and the parcel's western side. So if you think of that fence as a wall, you can imagine what some of the multifamily might look like in that context. And it would be two-story. This is looking along Gwynn, looking west. You can see the condition of the right-of-way. It's not fully improved. It's a 40-foot right-of-way, however, a public or a private road. And then looking east towards Pillar Estates. This is the one two-story home in the neighborhood. It's the only one that I saw during a site visit. This is in the Parkview subdivision. And this is the entrance to the mobile home park on Gwynn, one of the entrances. This is kind of looking in the park towards the subject property. So you can imagine what two stories might look like at the rear of those. Here you can see some of the slopes on Gwynn as you head west towards Central. And then here's a view of the teen center. And then this shows the break in the sidewalk network on Gwynn. It's important to note there are not sidewalks on the south side of Gwynn at this time for the most part. But the north side is only interrupted in this location. It looks like it's part of the teen center, but it's actually the parcel further west that Jacobs Engineering is on. And then this is looking the other way at that break. Now you're looking towards Central. You can see after passing that break in the network, the sidewalk picks back up all the way out to Central. This is now back on Pickett, also looking towards Central. This would be the north side of Pickett. And then looking east on Pickett with Pearson Park on the right side. Here you can see the sidewalks on the east side, or sorry, the south side of Pickett. Heading east, an extension of the sidewalks, looking west towards Pearson Park. And here we see the intersection with sorry, trying to remember the Grace, is it Grace Park? Yeah, Grace Park intersection. And the reason why Pickett is fully improved is the subdivisions that I was mentioning in those earlier slides. It was fully improved and accepted by the county, and that's why Gwynn was not accepted by the county. So I'm going to finish up here. This is the break on Gwynn, and you can see in a moment why it's so challenging for the developer to assume responsibility for that. There's a lot, or sorry, on Pickett, excuse me. There's a lot of vegetation and a fence line that are in the right-of-way. And then here you can see right here would be, this is the property being proposed for development, and that would be fully improved along that frontage. So I believe that's it. I'm going to end my presentation there. Thanks for your patience, and I'm open to answering any questions you might have.
Thanks so much. Questions at this time from Mr. Lazare? Yes, Commissioner Mitchell.
In light of what you said about most or parts of this project being principally permitted, but we're here because of the subdivision and the flexibility that they're asking for, can you recap any concerns that you've had directly related to those requests, if any?
Given the nature of what's principally permitted, I think it would be hard to isolate any concerns that would be specific to the planned development or the subdivision itself, if I'm hearing your question correctly. Most of the concerns could be equally laid at the feet of the principally permitted development that's allowed.
I guess what I mean is, has there been anything said about, we don't want it subdivided for a specific reason, or we don't want a PUD for a specific reason?
I think I can answer that. One concern about subdivision that was expressed by some, not a number, just a few members of the public, is that what happens after a subdivision occurs and you have multiple ownerships. Now, I can say that in the conditions of approval for public works, it requires putting in place certain maintenance contracts and relationships, and that's intended to address that. That's the only concern that I've heard with respect to the PUD or the subdivision itself.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
So when this is done, there'll be 4 single-family homes, and then can they come back and apply for ADUs and add 4 additional units?
It would be difficult, given the development footprints. They occupy nearly all of the lots.
But doesn't the state require that you permit the ADUs?
They're allowed to be in all zones that allow residential development, which this would be.
Would be.
But I'm just saying, in all honesty, it would be very difficult, given they're 2 stories to begin with, and there's not a lot of room to build out beyond where one is a 0 lot line, so obviously there's nothing in that. So I would say that'd be highly unlikely.
So how is garbage going to be handled? Because I worked on a similar subdivision, and it was similar in size, but it only had 36 units. And I know the service district requires you have 2 cans, a recycling can and a trash can, and there's cans everywhere. Where do they put the cans after trash day?
The most central parcel on the largest of the subdivision would be where most of the shared facilities would be, just given the space requirements.
So everyone would have to take their 2 trash cans all the way down there?
I don't have a precise answer. We don't have a garbage can layout.
I'm just saying that that is a real issue that, when you go into that subdivision, I didn't think about, but it's really a problem when you have that many people in a concentrated area with limited parking, and then you throw 2 garbage cans per unit. It's just a mess, and the birds are picking all the trash, and it's not a pretty sight, so. And it had half this units.
And I think the developers here could potentially indicate
that
what he
question.
anticipates on
Okay.
that, yeah.
Sure, and I was going to recognize that the developer's here, and as per our general rules, he'll be given a chance to make an initial presentation prior to the rest of public comment. Any other questions right now from Mr. Lazar, or shall we go to public comment? Commissioner West.
I think it's just one brief question. So the applicant has a list that he has provided of additional provisions that he is willing to comply with. If we wanted to make those a part of our requirements, what do you suggest, how do you suggest we do that?
I would incorporate the letter dated November 14th by reference in a motion.
Actually, we will write some conditions for you to specifically require those. Okay.
Commissioner Mitchell.
I know that the state has made it easier in most cases to do secondary dwelling units or ADUs. In a situation like this where it's unlikely, I've seen where the development rights for those secondary units are not available unless certain things happen. Would it be a potential to give more comfort to folks if we were to, and would we be allowed to, not have those rights just available without a process?
I think if you, and maybe I need to share my screen to show this, but if you were to look at the single-family units that are proposed to half-plexes, I think the thing that Mr. Lazar was trying to say is there's just literally not room left on the site to add an ADU. We're not precluding it. It's just functionally. And so if you would like to include some language in the findings that there's not sufficient room to add ADUs, and then include a condition on the conditional use permit that because of the lack of room, that there won't be an ADU to the 4 units that front onto Pickett Road, we could certainly do that. The existing house does have an ADU proposed with it.
Thank you.
Okay. If with that, then let's move along to the start of public comment, and I would first invite the developer, with or without your agent, to make a presentation that could be up to 15 minutes per our guidelines. Don't need to take that long if you don't need to. And then we'll hear other public comment, at the end of which you'll have a chance to come back up and respond to anything that was said if you wish. So go ahead, sir.
All right. My name is Dane Valadeo, and I'm one of the developers on this project. I want to thank the planning department, Steve Lazar, and Public Works for working closely with us and our team, Mike O'Hearn, who's here this evening, as well as Trinity Valley Consulting Engineers, and their help drafting this map. I'd also like to thank the Planning Commission for considering our submission, and Chair Levy and Commissioner Mitchell for meeting with me last week, to walk through the development and being able to visualize it. We purchased this property, and I do apologize for information that may be repeated. This is my first time speaking, and I didn't know how in-depth Mr. Lazar was going to go. So we purchased this property in 2019 because of the R3 zoning. As Mr. Lazar said, this property was owned by Liberta Gwynn, and likely had never been on the market before. I want to point out this property was listed on the market, and it was marketed for development. This is an excerpt from the public listing. It says, this 3-bedroom, 2-bath home is situated on 2.52 acres and zoned R3D, which allows for multifamily use, allowing a minimum of 7 units and up to 30 units per acre, subject to design approval by the county. And I just want to, I want to point this out because this wasn't an off-the-market transaction. This thing was marketed to the public. We like this property because it's well located for walkability purposes. There's a bus stop about a quarter mile away between Pickett and Gwynn on the east side of Central. There's 2 grocery stores, there's multiple restaurants, and there's entertainment, all within walking distance to this property. And I'd like to reiterate the comments from the Coalition for Responsible Transportation and Priorities. New development at this level of density or greater is appropriate for a site so close to the proposed future McKinleyville Town Center. CRTP, and I just was reading some additional comments that came in earlier this week. They submitted additional comments on Monday stating they actually would like to see higher density and less parking, and additional improvements for bike and pedestrian safety. Although in the R3 zoning allows for higher density, you would likely have to go 3 or 4 stories to meet that, and that's not our preference to go that high. We designed this map to conform to the neighborhood the best we thought we could. As you saw on the map, on the north side that fronts Pickett, we're proposing 4 single-family homes. We thought this would act as a nice transition from a traditional single-family neighborhood into apartments. We are also proposing affordable housing via a combination of 1 and 2-bedroom units. I do think there is misinformation going around about this project that it's low income. This is not a low income project. This is an affordable housing project. None of these units are earmarked for low income. And in today's market, It's more affordable to rent than it is to buy, and we need more affordable housing than ever. We are proposing a subdivision into 19 lots. The current lot is only about 165 feet wide. Given the requirements for the road that's going to run through the proposed subdivision, Jack Way, and the required width for 90-degree parking, we elected to proceed with a PUD to request certain interior variances. I'd like to point out that the variances requested are all located within the subdivision, and all setbacks with neighboring parcels are standard. There have been a number of comments and concerns voiced on various platforms, and I'm going to do my best to answer those. I live in Grace Park myself. I have small children, and so I do understand everybody's concern. I've lived there for 5 or 6 years. A recurring comment is acknowledging the need for housing. Everybody wants it. The issue is nobody wants it in their neighborhood. Humboldt County has a lot going on for it with the growth of Cal Poly Humboldt, the potential of the fish farm on the peninsula, and offshore wind. These projects are going to have a huge impact on the housing stock in the coming years. Comments about the vehicles and increase in traffic. As you saw, we designed the one-bedroom units so that there are 2 buildings with shared access in the middle. What that does is it helps protect the staircase from the weather. It helps protect the entry into the units from the elements. But it also gives us an area for storage between the 2 buildings at the back. The storage on the first floor is going to be committed for locked bike storage. So folks will be able to store their bikes, lock them, and be able to keep them out of the elements. In addition, this development is about a quarter mile from public transportation, so folks can walk to the bus stop. In discussions with Director Ford the other day, he mentioned that the county is in the process of working on a public transportation hub in McKinleyville that will work to increase public transportation around McKinleyville as well as neighboring cities, Arcadia, Eureka, what have you. And the idea is that I believe they're going to be, like smaller buses and more of them, and so it doesn't need to be the big bus. I mean, they'd have more transportation options for folks. Steve, could we go to slide 1, please? Okay. As a map you've seen, but what I want to reiterate is we have residential housing to the north, to the east, and to the south. And then to the west, we have a couple mobile home parks and commercial. This is the definition of infill. The traffic from the residents of the apartments should have very little impact on the neighborhoods. They're going to come up Pickett, they're going to come up Gwynn, and they're going to enter the subdivision. There's no reason that they are going to impact the Grace Park neighborhood or the Pillar Estates neighborhood. Could you go to the next slide, Steve? Just wait. Well, while it comes up, I'll just get started. So I wanted to address some concerns about, students and safety. The map that's going to come up is going to show you a route that the middle school students who live in these neighborhoods use to go to school. When Grace Park was developed, there was a trail system that was installed that allowed students to access the campus without having to go down to Central. For the most part, you'll be able to see that students are still going to be able to commute to school on foot or on bike and not drive by this development. There it is. So students can get to the school without actually going right by the development. For students leaving school and heading to the teen center, they walk down Central to the traffic light. They can either walk east on Pickett, which has sidewalk all the way to the teen center, or they can continue down south on Central and walk up Gwynn. There is a part of Gwynn, about 80 feet, that is not completed, or it does not have sidewalk, and we've committed to finishing that sidewalk, subject to getting approval from the landowner, because it is privately owned and there's no, it doesn't look like there's an easement that would grant us the right to do that. The conditions of Gwynn Road. You've seen some pictures, those of you that visited it, that road has been in need of repair for a long time. As of today, our proposed development has had no impact on that road. Gwynn is not a county-maintained road. Condition of approval that has been added is for us to either attempt to put together a road maintenance agreement or put together a road maintenance agreement and fund it and try to get neighbors to contribute. If we put it together, I don't know why they would join. There are 200 plus residents that use that road, and that doesn't include folks from Grace Park that actually cut across Stevens just because they want to beat one light. We are very willing to attempt to put together this road maintenance agreement with the neighbors. And I actually have one neighbor who's here tonight who volunteered to help with the petition. I don't think it should be our sole responsibility to repair and maintain Gwynn when it's been in this condition for as long as I can remember. Just a quick, if you could go to the next slide, are we able to? I just want to.
Can you share the screen again, Trip? Thanks.
It's all right. I'm running out of time. I had some photos of a subdivision or of an apartment complex that my parents built about 15 years ago that they still own and manage. And if we could get them up, but it sounds like it's acting up. Really what it shows is it shows pride of ownership. I mean, so here you go. This is 15 years old. We have residents who've actually lived there since we built the thing. It's very clean, it's well kept. This is 25 units that's right next to the middle school. And we've never had issues with crime. The next slide, these are some additional photos of some houses with mother-in-law units that we did build. And again, what I want to point your attention to is, pride of ownership in building these, and we still own these. These, we don't have plans of selling them. There's various things we do, various upgrades we do, because, we want a well-built home. We're going to hold on to these for a long time, something that's going to last us for decades. The comments about crime, it comes down to property management. We've been managing real estate for a long time. It's in nobody's best interest to rent to people that are going to harm your property. On Sunday, we held an open house, invited anyone who was interested in learning about our proposed plan. It lasted about 2 hours. Director Ford was there, and thank you, very helpful. We were there to answer questions. listen to concerns, and ask for input on safety measures to ease those concerns. You guys have seen the list of commitments that we're willing to commit to. Just a couple things I want to touch on is constructing urban driveways, which basically is like, it mimics like a driveway into your home, and what it does is it slows traffic coming onto Jack Way and leaving Jack Way. So that's a deterrent, a speed
Mr. Valadeo,
deterrent.
if you
Yes,
could
sir.
try to wrap it up
You
in
got it,
about a
yep.
minute. Again, we'll have a chance to ask you questions later,
Sure.
but thank you.
One thing I want to ask is, I do have a couple requests. The phasing, which Steve talked about. The leniency in the height of the building, our solar shade study was done at 26 feet. And the elevations were done at about 24 feet, 23 feet. And that's because we did a 6/12 pitch and a 4/12 pitch. We would prefer the lower, but we want to make sure we have plenty of room in the attic for HVAC and other sort of infrastructure that's needed. And lastly is flexibility on the footprint of the buildings on lots 5, 6, 7, 17, 18, and 19. We believe we could get these as low as 64 feet, but there are ADA concerns that we have to deal with. And so, we're proposing 80, but hoping to be able to reduce the size down to 64 feet. That should be a benefit for the neighbors because we're going to be able to add more landscaping and get more light that goes through these buildings. It should be more aesthetically pleasing. So just to wrap up, so we believe we've prepared a map that better conforms to this neighborhood. We believe we've done everything we can to put this project that better conforms to the neighborhood than what's principally allowed. Thank you for your time, and here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there are questions that commissioners will have, but I'm going to ask us to hold off until after we get through other public comment, and that will probably enlighten whatever questions we may wish to ask. So thank you, Mr. Valadeo. And now I would invite anyone else in the room to start to come up, just so we can keep it moving along. Ma'am, you can be first. Thank you. I just want to say, I will allow up to 3 minutes for each speaker because I understand how deeply felt some of these concerns are, but please try to be concise. And if you don't need to take all 3 minutes because other people have said things, then thank you.
I sent you an eloquent letter, and it apparently got lost in cyberspace. So you have a handout, 2 from me, Cindy Condit, and you're going to
yes.
get the short version, and I'm just going to read it, and it's just 2 pages, so it should be fast.
Thank you.
So I read through all the documentation attached to the November 2 Planning Commission meeting agenda. While drainage was mentioned several times, some details were omitted or glossed over, which provides for some inaccuracies and lack of consideration of the neighboring properties downhill to the east. Although the agenda attachments state the overall slope of the lot is from the south, Gwynn Road, to the north, Pickett, it does not mention that the Gwynn half of the property also slopes substantially from west to the east toward our homes. We are in Parkview. I didn't know we had a name. This eastward runoff is not addressed in any of the agenda attachments, and it's my primary concern. As a resident of the neighborhood for 27 years, details and the resulting suggestions are based on direct observation. They are not based on opinion. They are physical problems that have direct impacts on the properties along the west side of Stephen Way, and they can either be exacerbated or relieved with this property development. You have some photos of my neighbor's backyard and house. So every rainy season, our west-facing yards toward the Valadeo property flood for a few weeks. And every 3rd or 4th year, the flooding extends under our houses, so the floor insulation has been removed from 4 of 6 houses. In those same flooding years, a seasonal pond forms on that south half of the Valadeo property and remains for 2 to 3 months, even weeks after the rain stops. The standing water percolates very slowly, moves laterally and downhill across the permeable layers, reaching our saturated soils. This extends the flooding time on our properties. Those underground tanks should help alleviate that, and I'm really glad to hear that's happening. However, the second source of runoff comes from the drainage on Gwynn Road itself. The Valadeo subdivision will provide rain gutters, no storm drains, along its property frontage on Gwynn. Runoff from the hill crest on Gwynn will be carried eastward by the gutters along the mobile park, then eastward along the front of the Valadeo property. The next property on Gwynn does not have gutters to divert the water, so that eastward runoff will turn northerly across our neighbor's property and continue into the flooded properties on Stephen Way. The 11 to agenda attachments do not mention this issue at all. The water needs to stay in gutters and be guided eastward completely to Stevens Way, where it'll naturally turn northward in the gutters, or you could even continue it all the way down to Pillar Estates if you wanted. I ask you to continue the curb and the gutter and sidewalks all the way to Stevens Way, and I really think that's going to alleviate the problem. And it won't affect any neighbor's property. Again, the eastward runoff is not addressed in the agenda. Mr. Valadeo's design and the county's requirements could certainly exacerbate the problem, or they could help mitigate the issue. And the one thing I want to mention, you might say, well, why are we worried about these yards flooding now? These houses were built when you guys weren't on the planning committee, if we had a planning committee. Anyway, and the sidewalk and the curbs are a dam to this downward flow, and there was nothing done to get the water through there. Then they built our houses in what would be the lake. So we flood under our houses, our backyards and things like that. And so Lou was by earlier and we talked and I showed him the problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Trip, let's make sure we get the 3-minute thing up there. Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Carol, and I live in the mobile home park directly behind Lot 17 of the proposed subdivision. The 2-bedroom fourplex behind my mobile home will be 80 feet wide and approximately 24 feet high, which is the full width and half the height of an IMAX movie theater screen. 2 points of concern is that the 2 planning commissioners, Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Levy, met with the developer for a tour of the site, which is close to being in violation of the Brown Act, as more than 2 would have disqualified them from the decision-making. This could be viewed as the developer cozying up to the Planning Commission. Also, not all residents within 300 feet of the planned subdivision were notified, and I find it hard to believe that the addresses for the mobile home residents are not readily available to the Planning Commission. It was also not disclosed whether the 10 feet behind the fourplexes between my mobile home and the Lot 17 building behind me will be used as patios or not, but patios would not allow for adequate privacy for folks on either side of the existing fence behind the east side of Deborah Drive. An attractive 6-foot concrete wall would work greatly to preserve the privacy and quiet in the senior mobile home park, and I ask that Mr. Valadeo reevaluate his position on this. If the 10 feet behind the fourplexes is not partitioned off for patios, this will create a 10-foot wide, low visibility alleyway for possible nefarious activities that could jeopardize safety and attract, there are a lot of homeless folks in McKinleyville. A row of 24 or 22 to 25 foot tall structures will shade out the tiny yards of the mobile homes where many seniors enjoy gardening and growing fruits and vegetables. I believe also its attachment 5A is a petition with the signatures of concerned locals. We have learned much since writing it, such as the parcel is zoned for multifamily dwellings and not single-family homes. Although there is no targeted density for this particular parcel, legislation would advise 70 to 30 units per acre, which comes out to 18 to 75 units. Therefore, far fewer single-story duplexes could be built and still be within suggested densities. If 2-story structures are built, reducing the number of rear-facing second-floor windows would help to better preserve privacy and noise reduction. Mr. Valadeo indicated himself that he would not like a subdivision like this behind his home, but he apparently thinks that we would. Housing should not simply be about cramming in as many people as possible to make as much money as one can. It should also be about neighborhood aesthetics, as well as the physical and mental well-being of the current neighbors and the future residents of the proposed housing development. In closing, I commented at the open house about how we all miss the cows. Someone stated that the days of cows were over and progress was taking place, but I beg to disagree. Although there may no longer be a future for four-legged cows on the parcel, there will certainly still be cows present. They'll just be cash cows.
Thank you. Go ahead, you have 3 minutes. Tripp, is it possible to put on the thing that starts to
Well,
beep?
it looks
at
like my
30
time's
seconds?
already started. Can I get that reset, please?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to speak over you.
Hi, my name is Roman Ortega. My family owns a house directly across from the development on Pickett Road, 1779 Pickett, where I live with my partner, and so we've been there for several years. So just want to request that the Planning Commission deny this project, or at the very least have a significant modification and reduction in units and parcels. So for the following reasons. So I'm one of the community members, one of the neighbors that did not receive public notice. And so that's just concerning that even with weeks with that information being out there, still have not received any notice. So I had to find out from social media and the talk around the neighborhood. So that's definitely not appreciated and concerning. So some of the concerns I still have, which I don't think were adequately addressed, were community safety for children and the elderly folks in the senior living center community. So I work with students in McKinleyville, and so whatever alternate routes were discussed, it doesn't negate the fact that the reality is dozens of kids go from the middle school over to the park, teen center, every day crossing Pickett and Central, which is already an extremely dangerous intersection with cars parked along Pickett, cars entering and exiting out of the shopping center, lots of near collisions, significant cause of potential harm to youth as well as other community members. So I haven't heard that adequately addressed. Also, the impact on the health and wellness of the seniors in the quiet living community, which will no longer be quiet. And so I want that to be considered and respected, as well as just the impact on property values for homeowners, as well as the significant impact on privacy for homes that are going to be around this multi-story complex. And so those are just some of the main concerns that I wanted to outline. I just wanted to respond to some comments that were made earlier that I think it was quoted, everybody wants housing, just they don't want it in their neighborhood. I would say that's untrue. I'm in support of housing, but I think the main problem is the density and the parcelization and size of this large proposal. So I don't appreciate that comment, and I don't think it's true. I also think the comment that was made, extra traffic is not gonna affect the neighborhood, I think is very dismissive, like untrue and disrespectful to neighbors that are voicing their concerns. I mean, extra traffic noise, coming and going, potentially different hours of the day and night, safety, off-street parking. It's like all these things are not just like, we're not just fabricating this out of thin air. So once again, dismissive. I didn't appreciate that comment. I think it's untrue and a little disrespectful. Yeah, so thanks for hearing me out. Just concerns to the safety of children accessing the park, accessing that crosswalk at Picketed Central, as well as impact on the health and well-being of the seniors and just the well-being of the whole neighborhood. I'm in support of housing, just reasonable housing for the design of our neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next speaker.
Hi, Tom Wheeler. I'm here representing the Redwood Coalition for Climate and Environmental Responsibility, or ROCR. ROCR supports the Valadeo subdivision. We're in a housing crisis that is being driven by a lack of housing supply. New development at this level of density or greater is appropriate for a site so close to the proposed future McKinleyville Town Center. We also appreciate the proposal to provide a shared parking facility, which we hope will lower the total amount of required parking and thus also the cost and environmental impact. We also echoed the comments of the McKinleyville Union School District regarding the need for pedestrian safety upgrades in the area for school children as well as the general public. We remind you that this and other developments are in the vicinity of the town center area and will need to accommodate and encourage pedestrians and bicyclists with comprehensive safety upgrades of Central Avenue and other nearby arterials. There are two ways that we can improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety for this project. The first is we ask that you narrow proposed traffic lanes from 12 to 10 feet and provide other traffic calming measures on Pickett and Gwynn to reduce speeds and improve traffic for all road users. Improvements to Pickett and Gwynn should also include bike lanes. These roads serve increasing volumes of traffic, and major efforts are being made to make the town center area bikeable. For that to succeed, we need to have our connecting roads have good infrastructure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, go ahead, please. And if other folks who would like to speak could maybe start to come up. You don't need to all come up at once, but just so there's the next couple folks
I have
ready to
something
go.
I'd like to enter in.
Yes.
A comment.
You can hand that to Trip over there. Thank you.
All right. Could you reset that for me?
Yeah, we'll reset that, sure.
So my name's Anthony Egink. I live at 2376 William Court, which is a couple of blocks away from this planned development. And as this development is planned, the developer seeks a multitude of deviations from the standards prescribed using the planned unit development permit provision, or the P combining zone. I understand why. But even though that this zone allows for a 75-unit zoning threshold, the 61-unit development as planned is simply too dense given the lot. A number of things are at issue, and most homeowners around this are opposed to it. There was a petition that went around that had 256 signatures. This area is composed of 10,000 square foot lot minimums, which is quarter acre minimums. It's quiet. It's large lot. It's older. It's mature landscaping, well-established homes, and the neighborhood is quiet. And we all paid more to have that. We could have bought a smaller house or a larger house on a smaller lot for less, but we didn't choose that. We chose to have space. We chose to have quiet, less traffic. This is the antithesis of that. This project is the absolute antithesis of why we are there. I understand that the developer wants to maximize ROI and minimize risk. I am not opposed to that. I'm a capitalist. I believe private enterprise and small business ultimately provide for the most efficient and creative solutions for our community. But this development leaves zero space. There's 10 feet between buildings. There's no landscaping planned at all. And the parking is extremely deficient. And there is not parking available on the street. The street parking there is already congested. And you have a private road, Gwynn. And I would like to point out some rebuts to some things I heard. Walkability. Yeah, it is walkable. But according to the most recent CEQA 2017, McKinleyville has one of the highest car alone transportation indexes in the county at 83%. There was something about higher density and less parking. I find that laughable. 3 or 4 stories is much more expensive to build, so I doubt that.
If you could wrap it up, sir, please.
All right. And there is a difference between what zoning is allowed and what is appropriate. And that is where you all come in. And I'd like you to take your time and make an appropriate decision.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Kringle. I live directly across the street from this planned development. I'd like to waste a few seconds of my time by saying that this being planned as R3 back in the 1980s, to me, is just incredulous to believe that your predecessors had the the infinite knowledge to plan the housing crisis that would be in California more than 40 years later. I mean, in my opinion, somewhere along the line, this zoning thing has been changed. Maybe not by you guys, but somebody along the line. This zoning thing was supposed to be done while this neighborhood was still being built. I mean, it's just laughable, really. I mean, and all the exceptions and variations you guys are giving them is just way over the top. The reason why they are wanting this planned unit development, even though they're not able to get the maximum usage out of it, is because the separation of those into separate parcels will make it much easier for them to sell, which we were assured by both Dane and his father that they were going to be keeping these properties for years, but they couldn't guarantee it. I mean, why even make a statement like that? I think you guys need to look at, I believe you all have one of these. You need to look at everything that's in here and don't just roll over. Well, in essence, we are, by the reduction in our property values, we are helping to subsidize this thing. And no consideration is being given to us at all. This is it's ridiculous.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Stuart Jewell. I have a written statement there that I want to read, but before I do, I had a little problem with that there was that there would be no traffic, increased traffic in those areas. I think from the young man that was proposing this, and then Mr. Lazar, he made a veiled threat to you guys that if this was not approved, that you would have to, he would be able to, the developer would be able to develop something other than that that would be worse than this. That was what he had said. I was a little surprised at that. And so I want to get on with what I have to say. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. You've heard a lot of, many of the issues and objections to this project, the increased noise, traffic, the increased light, the lack of adequate parking, the decrease in property values, all those things. I'd like to draw your attention to 1795 Pickett Road. That's directly at the end of Jack Way. Every car that travels north on Jack Way will turn left onto Pickett Road directly in front of 1795 Pickett Road. Some cars will ease onto Pickett Road, others will not. But all of them will turn directly in front of 1795 Pickett Road. At night and in the morning, every time a car leaves the subdivision, maybe 50 to 100 of them a day, the car's lights will shine directly on the front windows and the bedrooms of 1795 Pickett Road. Now let me tell you about the retired couple that live at 1795 Pickett Road. They are third-generation Californians. They relocated to Humboldt County to live closer to their daughter, who attended Humboldt State University. She came in 2012, graduated in 2022 from Cal Poly Humboldt University. They purchased their home at 1795 Pickett Road, a quiet, beautiful place where you can watch the sunset behind the totem pole or watch the forest from your front lawn. This home was to be our retirement home in a coastal community of California where you can hear the waves breaking at night, not hear the sounds of traffic or other large city noises. The Valadeo subdivision will take most of the small town charm away from this residential community. The ability to sell our property with the increased traffic directly in front of our home will deter other home buyers and could ultimately cost us thousands. We love being McKinleyvilleans. Please look for other solutions to help keep this residential community together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. By the way, I just want to announce, we are going to need to take a short break, as we always do soon, maybe 7:45. Doesn't mean we will cut off public comment if not everybody's had a chance, but I just wanted to highlight that we do need to take a short break in another 10 or 15 minutes. But yes, please go ahead. We have your letter. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura Peterson. I've been a resident of Humboldt County for 23 years. As you can see, I've submitted a lengthy comment regarding the legal ramifications of allowing this proposal to continue. I have provided each code section relied on for each one of my conclusions. I ask the County Council review it before the proposal is approved, and I am happy to sit down with them. I'm not a real estate attorney, but I do understand contract law. I am a retired tax attorney and CPA. I worked for Price Waterhouse for 5 years, the second largest real estate firm in LA for 2 years, and I was senior tax counsel for Nissan Motor Corporation for 5 years. So I get that real estate development is about maximizing profits and pushing the responsibilities to everyone else. I get that. But you know, I think it should be at least required to follow the law. The applicant is required to provide 134 parking spaces. There is no exception for public transit nearby, and we have so much parking on Pickett that we need that. The proposal does not meet the solar shade requirements, and the only way to meet them is to bring them down to 2 stories. And finally, and most importantly, this proposal violates the very purpose and intent of the PUD provisions, the P code, on its face. And if we allow it to continue, we create a disastrous roadmap that other developers will follow to circumvent the building code, the very laws meant to protect us. The P code covers planned developments, like the McKinleyville Town Center, condos, townhouse developments. Their purpose is to create beauty and a sense of community. They require residential amenities such as open space, recreation areas, neighborhood commercial services like a clubhouse, a gym, or a pool on the subdivision itself. And they require that those common grounds, those residential amenities, be owned, managed, and operated by a nonprofit incorporated owners association. The proposal has done none of these. It is a parking lot with 2-story boxes crammed into tiny little lots with no common areas and no owners association. What it does have is 19 owners who can blame each other for the condition of the compound rather than take any responsibilities themselves. That is how we got Gwen Road. The proposal fails as a matter of public policy because it fails to meet the very purpose of the law. And while a P code allows clustering, these tiny little lots that they're putting on, it does not allow clustering for clustering's sake. The clustering must be in concert with the residential amenities discussed above. To allow this project P status is to provide a roadmap for others to circumvent the code, because then any project can label themselves a PUD, thereby avoiding building code requirements, cramming in as many buildings as possible into tiny little lots with tiny narrow roads with no setbacks, no dedicated parking, no open space,
please.
no beauty, and no owners association. Please make them follow the law.
Thank you so much for this letter and for your thoughtful comments. Now, are there others here in the room wishing to comment?
Thank you.
You know what? Maybe now is a good moment to take a break. Well, I'm going to not be able to get through Zoom, but Okay, let me just see, is there anyone else here in the room wishing to speak in person on the Valadeo subdivision? If not, I will close public comment for in-person. Okay, I mean, if you guys are okay, we can go a little bit longer and maybe see if we can get through the Zoom as well. It is only 7:29, so I do see at this point one hand up, but I would now invite members of the audience who are watching on Zoom or by phone to please raise your hand if you wish to comment on the Valadeo subdivision. So far I see 3 hands up. So we'll start to go through those. Gabrielle Holtzke, you're first. If you could unmute yourself, or perhaps you are unmuted now. You have 3 minutes.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, Gabriel. Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm a homeowner on Gwynn with direct line of sight to the proposed development. And yeah, well, I'd love to keep the cows. I understand the need for higher density housing, especially near the proposed town center. So I just want to offer a word of support for this development, even though I do live nearby. I support the additional safety upgrades to support pedestrians and cyclists. Would love to see the additional sidewalks and cyclist lanes if possible. And just want to offer a word towards consideration of mitigating light pollution. That's one thing I didn't see in the plan, but would be much appreciated for the neighbors if we can make sure there's some kind of ordinance towards downward, inward facing lights so it doesn't impact the neighborhood. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next hand on Zoom is KL. Go ahead, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name's Kathy Gallagher. I live on the corner of Gwynn and Pillar, and I have 2 comments that I think are appropriate for this. One is the density is just too high. I agree with so many people who have said just because you can build at this density doesn't mean that you should. It really is inappropriate for this neighborhood. The mobile home parks are approximately 30 units. They're fine. That's plenty of room, and that's plenty of units, and they can make plenty of money on one street by doing something like that. Double the number of units is just crazy. It's just too many people. The 2-story development seems outrageous to me, but you guys apparently are just fine with all of that stuff. It's hard to believe, but like I said, just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. The other thing is the discussion about Gwynn Road was just unbelievable by the planning department. Gwynn Road should be a county road. And the fact is that Gwynn Road is not a county road because the county doesn't want to take responsibility for the maintenance and doesn't want to be liable for the accidents that occur by the fact that Gwynn Road does not conform the way it should. And if you're going to allow higher density development, the county should take responsibility and take over Gwynn Road, bring it up to standards, and put in the safety measures that you need on both Gwynn and Pickett. The county is responsible for this. The county is going to be responsible for the amount of extra vehicles that are coming up and down if you allow higher density in here. You're shirking your responsibility by just saying, oh, well, we'll just see if we can figure out how to get the rest of the people in the neighborhood to deal with it. I understand the county doesn't have enough money for this stuff. The county doesn't have enough money for developing McKinleyville Center either, but you guys are figuring out a way to work around it, so figure it out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. The next hand raised is Dana Deason. Go ahead and unmute, and yes, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. I just want to make a couple comments. I want to echo people's concerns about the parking. I think 133 spaces or 134, whatever is required, is even that seems a little inadequate, but I understand the goals about getting more people to use public transportation. That's actually something I support. However, when I look at the Redwood Transit Authority's schedules for the bus stop that is in front of where this development would be on Central, or down where Central is, the last bus southbound, I believe, leaves at 8, or excuse me, northbound. No, sorry, the last bus, basically the bus stop, the buses end north and southbound at that location around 8 or 8:30. So that's not really feasible for people to use on a regular basis. Plus they only arrive once an hour. So I realize you don't have control over that, but I would hope that if you're using public transportation as a reason to limit the amount of parking, that you also work with the transit authority or whomever to increase the both frequency of the buses, and that you have them go later in the evening, because that's simply not a viable solution for people who work in Arcata or Eureka or North in Trinidad, to have a bus that ends at 8 a.m. and only runs once an hour. So I just want to say that. And also parking, Pearson Park is used a lot, that especially when there's Thursday night concerts or throughout the summer when there's activities. There's a lot of parking happening, or when there are dances or anything happening at the community centers, weddings, whatever. So I would hope that that we consider that. Also, when we're thinking about parking, I am concerned Parkview is sort of keeps being ignored in the way it's the discussions around Parkview and the impacts on Stevens Way. You know, it said, oh, well, it can be a pass-through, but then it also is saying that there's no impact on Stevens Way. So, it feels like that's what the developer is saying. So please just consider that when you are looking at this proposal. And also finally, I think I have 21 seconds left.
Yep.
If we have an RMA, it feels like a false choice. We either have to pay for an RMA on Gwynn, or we have to live with even more deteriorated conditions on that road. That doesn't seem like a fair choice for the residents. So I'd like that taken into consideration too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next hand I see raised is Cheryl Phillips. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for listening to me tonight. I've been a resident in Grace Park for 35 years, and we love this area. It's quiet, it's safe, and the problem I have with the development, that it just does not fit the area of the homes that are here. The cluster of apartments is not fitting. I'm not against any development, but this project is not proper for our area. I'm also very concerned about the additional traffic that will be happening up and down Pickett and Gwynn, the safety of the children in the area. There was a child hit by a car several years ago across the street from this proposed project. He lived, but there was that accident in that area. So I just want to say that you need to possibly rethink the not the zoning, but the proposed units themselves and the number of units. It's too many people for that area. That's my opinion. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. The next hand on Zoom is Donna Kuhn. Go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I live in Thunderbird Mobile Home Park, and as soon as I heard about this, my response is that I'm going to sell my house and leave. I do not want to listen to this noise of construction and lack of privacy and pollution. So it's kind of turned my life upside down. And this is supposed to be quiet senior living here, and there's no way it's going to be quiet. And I don't think many people would want this right outside their bedroom window. So there's no way I can stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. I see one more hand raised at this time. Let me just say, if you are on Zoom or on phone and have not yet commented and wish to, please go ahead and raise your hand just so we know how many are in the queue. I'm hoping we can get through all this before a break, but we may have to stop and take a break. So again, please do raise your hand now. And the next hand I see raised is Jim and Am Gable Kim. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we had some other devices.
Yeah, you need to turn down that. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to join in with the other voices of feeling that this project is completely out of character with this neighborhood in this area and is far too dense, far too tall and wide, and the street between going down the middle is going to be this narrow alley. It's completely unlike anything else in the neighborhood, and just it's going to really not conform with any of the development issues. And the other thing is the disaster of Gwynn Road and the traffic that's already on Gwynn Road. It's sometimes we can't even get past the rec center. There's a long line of people, and it's just going to add to that. People will be waiting out into the middle of Central trying to get up Gwynn. But also the maintenance of Gwynn. We were shocked to discover that Gwynn is not part of a county-maintained road. And if you even think about approving this project, please build into it taking over responsibility for Gwynn Road by the county. Because if you're going to dump this development on us, the least you can do is give us a decent road to get in on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, one last call for anyone on Zoom or phone who has not yet commented and wishes to. I see one hand. That is Joel Rink. Please go ahead and raise your hand if there's anyone else. Otherwise, Joel Rink will be our last speaker. Go ahead, Joel. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thanks for taking me on Zoom. I just want to echo the statements from Kay and Jim about the road use of Gwynn. This high density will definitely add to the increase in traffic at Gwynn Road and also Pickett. I forgot to mention I live towards the end of Gwynn Road in Pillar Estates, so I use that road every single day. Mr. Valadeo issued the statement, it's already a bad road, so why should he have to pay for it? Well, when you have a subdivision that increases traffic at a bad road, that's a pretty poor argument. If you increase what that road, the ability to transport all that traffic, you do have a share in that road. The extra traffic, now we have the skate park right there, we have the teen center, and we have the child care center. There's all kinds of kids running around there. And you know what? Kids don't follow lines on a map on how to get place to place, and they are all over there. And just one last thing, we have had people in the past help fill in potholes, but we do not have Supervisor Ryan Sundberg anymore out there on his own patching those potholes in. So we just don't have access to all that cold mix and everything on that road. So I agree that if this does go through, that there needs to be something in place where that Gwynn Road is addressed, and something more than an attempt to get the community to pay for that road would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands raised, I am going to close public comment and thank each of you for your thoughtful and often informative comments. We will take a 10-minute break right now. When we come back, as per our procedures, I will offer Mr. Valadeo a chance to briefly respond to the public comments that he's heard, if he wishes, before we get into a more full discussion. So let's be back here in 10 minutes. That's 7:46 or 7:56 according to the clock on the wall, 7:54 according to your phone. You mean on Zoom? Well, you mean start recording it or whatever? Yeah. Yeah, sure. It has been 10 minutes. So, although we're still minus one commissioner, I'm sure he'll be back any second, but we have a very full agenda, and so I said we're going to bring it back now to return to the Valadeo project.
Recording in progress.
As I said before the break, we closed public comment. We did get through everyone in the room or on Zoom who raised their hand, but I do want to give it to Mr. Valadeo now to offer a brief response to the comments. Our guidelines say 3 minutes. However, that doesn't include the fact that we may have questions for you afterwards or later in our discussion, which you can come back and answer. So with that, please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Just to hurry through this, so one neighbor brought up drainage. We will have a drainage study that is required for the on-site detention and LID requirements from the county and the state level. One neighbor brought up the 2 stories in the windows and the kind of loss of privacy. Where her unit is, the proposed townhome styles, 2 of the interior units, we could not remove the windows on the back because you have to have it for fire exit. Though it would, the 2 bedrooms, one of the bedrooms overlooks her property. So even just for her property, we could not move that one window or on those 2 units. That said, something, we would commit to is like the up-down mini blinds. We use them personally in our house. You can, block the lower part of your window while allowing natural light into the top. A lot of people like those. It gives privacy and you're not looking down on your neighbor. I mean, it's a small gesture, but it is something that we'd commit to. Someone brought up a landscape plan. It is a condition of approval that will be submitted, upon approval of our map. Folks brought up, kind of why we want to subdivide and what happens if we sell to other people. The truth is you subdivide for financing reasons. If you can get down to 4 units or less, you qualify for conventional financing. Above that, you're commercial. Outside of that, our intention is not to sell these, but yes, we do have the right to sell these. One of the conditions is a road maintenance agreement or, homeowners association agreement for this development. If it's not clear, happy to, add a condition that there's CC&Rs in there so that you can sell to, it can be sold, but there's still guidelines that homeowners or, the owner of the property is bound by. Light pollution, I did add it in my slide, but we didn't get to it. At least on the back sides of the apartment units, we put in up-down lights anyways so that we don't have light pollution. So, any exterior to neighboring parcels, happy to commit to up-down lighting. So we are not, polluting the light pollution there. Also, in our road maintenance agreement, or at least a road maintenance agreement with Gwin, we will give a valid effort to try to put together a road maintenance agreement. And, we will also commit, if we do not get buy-in, that we will fund that per our impact on Gwin Road. So, we're not trying to skirt any responsibility on Gwin. And so that's something we can work with our engineers to determine what our impact is on Gwin. Last, folks asked about Gwynn and the county taking it in. I would refer folks to Public Works because they have a plan to accept the balance of Gwynn into their maintenance schedule. The issue is there's a lot of improvements that need to be made, and there's encroachments that need to be removed. So if anyone would, I don't have the ability to speak to it, but I would refer you to someone in Public Works who could give you the exact roadmap to getting Gwynn, the balance of Gwynn, into public maintenance.
Thank you so much. Thanks for keeping it short at this time. Are there questions right now that the commission may have for Mr. Valadeo? Commissioner Mitchell.
Given the number of concerns about Gwynn Road and the lack of certainty as to whether the whole community will come together to form a road maintenance association, has there been any consideration given to making the Gwynn Road side either entrance only or exit only to cut down the number of trips by half, except for emergency vehicles, of course?
Yeah. If the commission thinks that we should make that, I mean, have we made that consideration? I have not. We could, if that's something that's that you deem necessary.
There was also something brought up about landscaping plans and plans for trash cans. You may not have gotten to that spot yet, but can you speak as to what your thoughts are regarding those two items?
Sure. So, some of the conditions, well, one of the conditions is a landscaping plan that we do need to submit, and there's a whole list of requirements, around drought resistant and what they're going to require. Also, a minimum of 1 tree per lot. So, that is something we'll have our landscape architect design, who has experience with the county and knows what does well here. As to the garbage and trash enclosure, so on the map, in the kind of shared, in the parking area, the kind of shared parking area, there is a spot designated for trash and recycling. And so folks will not be, getting their own trash and having the blue and gray cans. There will be community trash, and that will be regulated through the road maintenance agreement / CCNRs and homeowners association. So,
thank you.
I have one brief question. You mentioned that there will be a drainage plan, a drainage study, and Mr. Lazard specified that the plan will specify that precipitation on the property on this, stays on the property, doesn't run off, but is contained and sunk there. It was illuminating to me to hear from the first in-person public speaker, Cindy Condit, about the existing pattern of runoff coming along Gwynn, down Gwynn, and the incomplete gutters or curbs that keep it from going onto the neighbors. Is that something that you've been made aware of? Is that something that perhaps the drainage plan and improvements, even off-site, could take on and accommodate?
Sure. So, we were made aware of it at our open house last Sunday. So by law, we can't drain onto the neighbors. We need to contain it, and we need to get it to the street. And that's what our drainage plan will accommodate for. What she's referring to is out on Gwynn. We will be improving our frontage. And then there's another lot that's probably 100 to 200 feet. I don't know. I haven't walked it off. But that is unimproved, similar to ours. Continuing the gutter down there. First, it's private. We would need permission to do that. I'm assuming we'd get it, but we'd need permission to do that. But, that's a fairly substantial offsite to put in. Have we considered doing it? To be honest, no, since we were only just made aware of this. But, would we go to that homeowner and say, hey, all our equipment's here, our contractors are here, are you interested in improving your lot? Absolutely. Whether or not we'd take on that cost, I don't know.
Fair enough. Thank you. Director Ford.
So one of the things I wanted to follow up on was the drainage. And after the meeting on Sunday, I did go out and look at that and talk to Public Works about it. And they're aware that drainage from Gwynn currently runs along the existing curb gutter and sidewalk that's to the west of this site and drains towards Stephen. So one of the dangers of just extending the gutter is that that will then channel the water all the way down to Stephen, which then drains north right to where the problem is. And so one of the things that they will need to do is pick that drainage up and not allow it to adversely affect the neighboring properties.
Okay.
So that will get dealt with. And that's probably why the south end of this parcel floods, is because the drainage coming down Gwynn runs down Gwynn until it gets to this parcel, and then it runs onto the parcel because it drains south to north.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner West.
Thank you for providing a list of additional commitments. Looking at, I just was hoping to get a little more clarification on a couple of them. So looking at the bullet point that says work with Public Works and the neighborhoods on traffic and pedestrian safety measures, crosswalks, speed humps, bulb outs. What does work with mean to you?
So I believe we need approval from Public Works to do anything on Pickett. And, you know, they're somewhat hesitant to do certain things in a meeting that we had with them, because then it becomes their responsibility for maintenance. You know, I do think there should be a speed hump on Pickett, and I talked to the neighbor whose stepson was hit about that. And he's, you know, looked into it with Public Works. And so, you know, I would say within reason. We can't widen the road and put in bike lanes and, you know, put a bunch of crosswalks and a bunch of speed humps. So, you know, potentially look for some guidance from you as to what you would, you know, what you would want to see, but kind of with the caution that, you know, it's not necessarily in our control. And then you got to get input from neighbors, because, you know, there's other neighbors that don't necessarily have the same issues that other neighbors have, maybe who live at the back of the subdivision or you know, what have you.
Can I ask more follow-up questions?
Sure, although Dr. Ford has something on this point, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I did leave the meeting on Sunday and talk to Public Works about it, and the guidance is that it is within your discretion what you want to require. And so the one thing that is kind of the performance criteria that they would look for is that it be at a stoplight, or I'm sorry, not a stoplight, but a street light. And so.
Sorry, you said the one thing that would.
Where the speed humps would be located would be at a street light. So it would be visible from the light, from the street light, and so the drivers coming upon that would see that. And so in response to your previous question, I put together a set of conditions for you to consider, and you can start to consider them now or later, but basic idea is 2 speed humps shall be installed on both Pickett and Gwynn, located at streetlights, subject to the approval of Public Works. And then a crosswalk shall also be installed on Pickett Road at a location approved by Public Works.
2 speed bumps, 2 on each road, or 2 total?
I wrote it to be 2 on each road. And you may want to ask the applicant what they think about that, but that's.
Well, applicant?
You know, I think it's necessary? Absolutely. Picket, I would say, yeah, I mean, if you guys would require, you know, 4, then.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell?
I just wanted to ask, in other areas where there's traffic mitigations that are needed off-site, we asked the developer to pay their fair share. Would it be appropriate to do the same thing here, Director Ford, in terms of saying they need to contribute towards that, but recognize that they're not solely responsible for it being created, but will make it potentially worse?
That's usually where there's a larger, this is a really good question. And that's usually where there's a larger kind of improvement that's required, where the applicant's share of that is only a small proportion. And so some ways to go about that is that you could collect money for that and then save it until the project is able to be done. The struggle with that is that you can only keep it 5 or 7 years, and then it has to be returned if you don't install the improvement. Or if you've got kind of a comprehensive plan that's collecting money to do that, you could do that. The other way of addressing things is really to identify what is equivalent to the fair share, the rough proportionality that Mr. Lazar talked about during the presentation, and just require that now. And that's why we're really trying to focus on the improvements relative to a speed bump, and then what can feasibly be done on Gwynn Road in terms of long-term maintenance. The other thing to consider is that if the county were to take over Gwynn, obviously the county would want to have improvements done first, and there's a whole set of problems. The reason the county didn't accept it in the first place is there's 1 or 2 mobile homes that are actually in the right-of-way. You know, the county doesn't want to accept responsibility for somebody's house being in the right-of-way. And so that is an extreme encumbrance to trying to resolve this. And so the idea here is that if we could do a road maintenance association, we could at least get a mechanism in place to maintain the road, if not improve it. If it were somehow to be accepted into the county's system as a public right-of-way, a maintained county road, the county, as is typical with other roads in McKinleyville, would then want a financing mechanism to pay for the maintenance of the road. So, I mean, no matter what happens, there's got to be a funding mechanism to maintain the road. I hope that helps.
Commissioner West, you had another follow-up.
The applicant, and I might have misunderstood, but I understood the applicant to say that the county was considering taking it into its maintenance plan. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that's a current discussion. I mean, I know it was offered for dedication, and the county rejected that.
Can I clarify? So what I meant to say was the county has a roadmap to where they would accept it upon certain conditions met. Sorry if I misstated that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Commissioner Scavdell.
Yes, just trying to understand. Gwen Road's a private road, but it's not clear who owns it. It's like your property actually, where your property corners aren't in Gwen Road. They're at the sidewalk. So who owns Gwen Road, and how could, and could we get, I mean, it would seem incrementally we would want to get Gwen Road dedicated to the county once improvements are made, and just not sure how that occurs here, since it doesn't appear your property is actually extends into Gwen Road.
No, I mean, you know, we have a right-of-way or an easement up to our property. Part of the conditions are, I mean, it's only a 40-foot easement, which is, you know, the driving lanes and the parking lanes. We are gonna, I mean, we're required to dedicate 10 feet on ours to the county for maintenance. I mean, no, but no, we don't own it. I don't know who owns, nobody owns it. I don't know.
It's just a right-of-way stranded out there somewhere?
I am uncomfortable saying this, but I do not have a clear answer for you. It was a road before, like Pillar Estates and some of the projects to the east went in. And somebody actually offered to dedicate it. Obviously, the county didn't accept it. And so those projects to the east allegedly were supposed to go Pickett to Stephen to Gwynn and up around the inn on public roads, not use Gwynn. Obviously, people use Gwynn. So, go ahead.
Mr. Lazar.
Thank you, through the chair. In speaking with Public Works about this, I think that the line, or the hair to be split here is that the road is not a county-maintained road. The offer of dedication was never accepted, but it is a public road, and that's why the assessor parcel boundaries don't go to the center of it, and it's publicly available for use, but privately maintained. That helps clarify things.
Best of both worlds. Okay, Commissioner West?
I have a question for the applicant on a different note, but I don't want to interrupt our road discussion if there's anybody else who wants to talk roads.
No, I mean, I think if we could get our questions out for Mr. Valadeo and then let him sit down, we'll continue the discussion. So, yeah.
For the bullet point that the up-down lighting in the rear of the buildings, did that come about because of concerns of glare on neighboring properties?
Yeah, from our meeting last Sunday that we had with neighbors, talking about, what kind of lighting you have back there. Is it going to pollute into my backyard? And so, yeah. And it may be code. I don't know if it's building code, but it's commonly used today.
And this may be a question for staff more than the applicant. Do we currently have any requirements on, I know we're working on a lighting code that will be coming before us later this year. However, should we want to see some dark sky considerations for this property, do we have any levers that have been pulled already, or would we need to talk about conditions for that?
So one of the things that I've got written here for your consideration whenever you're ready for it is a condition that says that the following are conditions of the planned unit development, and then all lighting shall be directed downward, shall not allow light to spill over onto adjacent property or create a glow into the sky above the lights.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Mulder.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you started off your proposal, you said this property was zoned R3 and marketed for R3. Was that, did I hear you correctly, or?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Landry.
Thank you for your presentation, and from this experience, I sense that you care about our communities, and that you care to address to the level that you possibly can. So I feel like you're authentic in your desire to do those things. I would point out that, I have some experience with the Cal Poly Humboldt and hearing anecdotal testimonies from students who have challenges with getting housing here, even when we have it available. And what they cite is discrimination. And so I'm curious in regards to what are some of the processes that renters would use to not rent to criminals? Like how do you accomplish that goal?
Well, I mean, you do, background checks. Yeah, you get resumes, you get applications. Excuse me.
I appreciate that. And then some clarity on the CICP calls for less parking. I was wondering if you had a little more background on helping me understand that.
It was a comment made that they submitted.
I guess then that entity, I'm not aware who that is.
It's the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, CRTP.
Okay, I get context to that. Thank you.
Yep.
And then more aesthetically pleasing compared to, and I didn't know what really to compare that to. And my apologies, I forget when that was brought up in your presentation, but there was a point about being more aesthetically pleasing. And I was looking for some clarity on that, if you remember where that was.
That was, if I could add.
Sure.
I believe that was related to the single-family dwelling units fronting Pickett. I think you made a comment about those being in front
Oh,
of the
sure, more
multifamily housing.
conforming to the neighborhood rather than just apartments right on Pickett Road.
Okay.
Is that-
Thank you for that clarity, too. And then there was another point. So Cal Poly Humboldt hasn't exactly had the flood of students that they would desire to. Perhaps that'll happen. Not sure where we're at with the some of the other peninsula developments, such as the fish farm. And then offshore wind, I've listened to presentations from our Harbor District staff discuss how they don't see that being a huge impact to our housing. So I just wanted to point a couple of those things out and potential discrepancies. But again, I feel like you are authentic in your presentation and mean to mitigate what you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Commissioner O'Neill.
So you said it's not low-income housing, but it's affordable housing. So what would you define as affordable housing for these units?
So I would say that apartments by nature are affordable housing compared to your traditional
But what would be
single
the typical
family.
rents for these units?
Market rents. I mean, you know, what are market rents today? I mean,
You're a landlord, so
sure.
you could probably tell me.
I'd say anywhere from $750 to $950 on a one bedroom, and anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 on a two bedroom.
I live in McKinleyville, I'll disclose that, and it seems like, you know, a lot of burden is put on McKinleyville for development, providing multiple housing units, increased density. It's been going on for a number of years, but I don't see the commitment from the county to improve our roads. I'm concerned that there's not a lot of off-site improvements required in this project. In a similar project that I mentioned earlier that I participated in, we had to put millions of dollars in off-site improvements to be able to do half the units that are being done here. And I know that's a burden on development, but we have no improvements going on in McKinleyville. You know, for those of us that live there, the roads aren't improving, the walkability's not improving. You know, they've done a few bike lanes down the main street, but that's about it. And so I'm concerned about the lack of improvement. I'm concerned about the lack of parking spaces, the lack of amenities. I think someone mentioned that, and I know we've discussed that on other projects. We increased some units in the mobile home park in McKinleyville, and they had to do trails and, you know, things on site where there's nothing like that here. So I do agree that we need more housing, and I'm totally supportive of housing, but not at the expense of our community and, you know, aesthetics in our community. I sympathize with the people that are going to see the impact, and even though it may be zoned for multifamily, it doesn't have to have this type of impact in terms of so many more people coming with less improvements to the you know, infrastructure in the area. I know the services district does a great job trying to fill in for the county, but you know, we don't have that much law enforcement, we don't have great roads, we don't have good bike paths, we don't have a lot of things. I don't like the fact that we don't know who owns Gwynn Road. I mean, that seems like something we need to figure out, because you know, somebody owns the land underneath it if the county doesn't. So we probably need to know the answer to that before we move forward, you know, or else I wouldn't even think that you should be able to access Gwynn Road with this subdivision. It would have to go out the other way, and then that's going to be a big impact to, you know, everyone wants a car. I mean, you know, you might want to say that you want to have a walkable community. It sounds really good, but everybody's got 2 cars in every household, it seems like. You know, there might be a few people in there that don't have a car, but most people have 2. And then if they have guests come over, there's no place for them to park. And so then it just becomes a big hazard. And if you are walking through that subdivision with that many cars, lack of spaces, people will park. I've seen them park all over the place in the subdivision that we did, because it was a walkable community with limited parking, but that, unless you restrict the tenants to not having cars, they're gonna have probably 2 per place. So those are my comments. I hate to just keep saying, gee, we need more housing, so we're gonna just throw out all the, other needs that we have in our community just to keep cramming more people in. There's other places in the county. It doesn't have to all happen in McKinley. Those are my thoughts.
Just to be clear, I do want to let Mr. Valadeo sit down and be done before we get too much into comments. If you do still have a question for Mr. Valadeo.
A direct question to make sure I heard, when you stepped up to the podium for your rebuttal, I heard you say, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly, if your attempts to form an RMA fail, you would be willing to have your engineer figure out what your impacts would be to Gwynn Road and be willing to financially mitigate those impacts. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, so we would set up the road maintenance agreement. Whether or not neighbors joined it, the agreement's there, and we would know what our impact is on that road, and we would fund it, yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, you've been very patient with us. Again, it's possible we might call you up for follow-up questions, but I think you've answered a lot of them, and I appreciate that, and I think we need to bring it back to an internal discussion. Thank you. So, Commissioner Mulder.
So I have a couple of questions for staff. I heard, I think it was about 40 years roughly this has been zoned R3, but I'm not positive 100%. But in not only how long it's been, how many units could be built principally permitted if we weren't going through this process?
75 or 79. 79.
Okay, thank you. Can I go through a list of comments and then go to the other commissioners? Okay. The applicant, I had a maybe set development amount for repairs to Gwynn. The applicant already offered that. I'm under the impression that we could add a condition of approval to capture that commitment, yes, that the applicant. And then the other question I heard from, I don't remember which name it was, but there was a comment that under the P zone, there needs to be shared amenities. I don't know, I saw on the map, it looks like a laundry facility and a couple other things. Does that meet the requirements, or what our allowances are? I just want to make sure, because when someone says that we're outside of the scope of the law, I always want to make sure I clarify those questions.
That was Laura Peterson's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer to that?
Are you asking me to come on?
No,
I
thank
need to
you, but
take a
not at
look
this
at the
time.
PD zone and look at that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell, yes.
Thank you. Let's see here. Oh, I presume that this lot is including in the land inventory for the housing element, and I'm wondering how many units we included as our representation of what this would
So given the
provide.
value of the house that's on the property and the size of the property, it is not included within our arena numbers.
So this would be additional capacity.
Would be an absolute benefit.
Okay. Now, typically when folks come in, because of the housing shortage, in the past we required them to meet at least the midpoint density. Is that still something that the county tries to do or does do?
Could you ask that again?
Sure. In the past, when working on the housing element, there were policies that suggested that when residential or especially multifamily lots were developed, that the county would require them to not go to the lowest end of the range allowed, but at least to the midpoint. So if it's allowed 7 to 10 per acre, we'd require at least 8 or 9. Is that something we still do?
I'm not familiar with that. That may have been in a policy in the past. Frankly, we probably haven't seen a lot of residential development recently. So I think that normally when you look at what the range is, you look to see whether it fits, is consistent with the aspiration of the density in the general plan. I think we find this is.
Okay. And I also would like to know, lastly, you mentioned a few different proposals, and you've read 2 of them. Are there others that you're going to suggest? Because I have a few that I'd like to add, but if you've already addressed them, I don't want to try to craft.
Sure. Let me share my screen.
That was, we were asking him.
So these largely come out of the applicant's agreements. There's obviously one to be made for Gwynn Road. But the first bunch there would be a new condition saying the following are requirements of the planned unit development. Mailboxes for the development shall be clustered in the center of the site. 1 bike storage locker shall be provided on the ground level for each second-story single-bedroom unit. All lighting shall be directed downward and shall not allow light spillover onto adjacent property or create a glow in the sky above the lights. Construction traffic access shall be limited to Pickett Road. A common screen trash enclosure shall be constructed on the common lot capable of serving all multifamily units. I was going to add the design of the enclosure shall be such that it does not interfere with traffic circulation. And then another condition stating that the following improvements shall be required prior to issuance of any construction permits for the second phase of the project. That would be excluding the half plexes on Pickett Road. An urban driveway shall be constructed at the entry of both Pickett Road and Gwynn Road. 2 speed bumps shall be installed on both Pickett Road and on Gwynn Road located at streetlights subject to the approval of Public Works. And a crosswalk shall be installed on Pickett Road at a location approved by Public Works. And then the conditional use permit includes the following finding: the 4 half plexes on Pickett Road do not include adequate space to allow accessory dwelling units. In order to maintain the integrity of the design being approved, it's necessary to include a condition to prohibit an accessory dwelling unit on these parcels, and then a new condition stating that the 4 half plexes are limited to the existing footprint and accessory dwelling units are prohibited.
That's great. Yes. I have a follow-up question. It is a number of letters we received and comments, many perhaps inspired by the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, suggested the possibility that the car lanes, the road lanes themselves, could be narrowed from 12 feet to 10 feet, which would have the effect, in theory, of slowing down traffic. It could also allow the additional width to perhaps have a bike lane. And I just wondered if that's feasible. Is that something that we might consider, you know, that we even have the power to impose here? What would Public Works have to say about that, and so forth? And I guess we don't have anyone from Public Works here tonight?
We do not.
No, okay.
And I'm a little hesitant to say that that is something we could do without really looking at what the overall plan is for not only bike trails within McKinleyville,
right,
but also just understanding how the roads function. I know we need to slow traffic down, and narrowing the lanes is certainly an important component of that. But is it just striping the lanes? I mean, that may or may not slow traffic. There may be more effective ways to do that.
Okay. Mr. Lazar has his hand up.
Just want to remind, remember, I did speak with Public Works about this. In a parking lot setting like this, where you have perpendicular spaces to the right-of-way itself, 25 feet is the standard backup distance. The right-of-way itself is only 24 feet, so it's already below standards for backup as it is. So it really would be pushing.
Are you talking about Jack?
Yeah,
Or-
you're talking about Jack.
I'm referring to
Oh.
Pickett,
Oh,
or
I'm sorry, I
maybe even
misunderstood.
to Gwynn, but that I was thinking more about those
Okay.
throughways. Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize.
Can I follow up with that?
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell.
So you've pointed out putting in the speed bumps, but would it be possible to have it more an open discussion with Public Works as to the best ways that we could feasibly do traffic calming measures on both roads? That could possibly include speed humps, but if there's other things such as narrowing that would be more effective or work together.
Yeah, if you, we could modify this condition to identify there may be other more appropriate ways to narrow the road. I mean, one of the things that I brought up at the Sunday meeting was to put planters going out into the road in front of this development so that it would neck the road down at that point and force people to slow down. But, you know, there may be some ways to do that.
If I may ask one other question, because it's something that came up in, I think in the photos that were presented, it's something that was pointed out to me when I visited the site, that at least on the Pickett, and in the adjoining mobile home park there, both the fence and the landscaping behind the fence is actually within the right-of-way. And how does that, and we're asking this project, you know, for the benefit of the whole community, to extend sidewalks through on the right-of-way, but there's actually a fence and landscaping there. I guess what I'm wondering is, I mean, does the landowner, the other landowner who put their stuff into the right-of-way, have some responsibility for removing it to allow for improvements like sidewalks that are going in?
I think part of the problem there is that they pre-existed the right-of-way.
Ah, okay.
So it's a matter of buying it.
I see. It's like, yeah. Okay. Yes, Commissioner West.
Clarification question about the sidewalks. We're asking the applicant to pay for the installation of the sidewalks, but not necessarily for the maintenance of the sidewalks, correct?
That would be the way the condition is written, yes.
And the sidewalks would be going onto other private property, or would they would be in the public right-of-way?
It would be within the right-of-way that the applicant does have access to. The easement that's granted does provide access to the applicant, even though it's not a publicly maintained road.
So who would be responsible for the maintenance and liability of the sidewalks?
That's the struggle with Gwynn.
Commissioner Scavdell.
If the applicant phases the project as proposed, with phase one being the housing facing Pickett, I would expect that they would be required to do the improvements on Pickett Road, including the traffic calming pieces, whether that be speed bumps or something else. Is that correct?
They would need to do that. Well, the way I wrote it, it would be prior to the second phase, just because that's probably what can be done right now is largely the half-plexes can be built without a lot of improvements to the property. Once the rest of the development goes in, they're going to start needing to make the connection to the road, regrade, redo things. And so all the equipment would probably be mobilized for purposes of installing pavement.
I'm saying I would expect the sidewalk and the driveways and
along the
even,
frontage,
and
yes.
even that, whatever we call that special driveway, not not constructing Jack Way, but all the Pickett Road street frontage improvements would be done with the Phase 1 development?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Landry, but then let's see if we can start to bring this home.
Okay, staff. Through the chair. So there, Mr. Kringle brought up some points in his comments in regards to this policy and that applies to this area being too old to really be relevant for today. I'm just wondering what our department's thoughts are about that type of an issue.
Well, I think that one of the things the plan that was done 40-plus years ago tried to do was to scatter various land uses out throughout the McKinleyville community plan area. And part of that was multiple family residential. And so you see that. And one of the things that you see if we were to put the land use plan up again is that you would see a sequence of going from east to west. You would see single family residential. You would see the R3 multifamily residential moving into the park, and then commercial. So there are integrated land uses that have interfaces at this location, and that's kind of common.
And then there were some assertions made about the legality of.
Oh, is your mic?
Thank you. And there was some comments about the legality of this, and any comments in regards to that?
Yeah, we've been looking at that, and I think the short answer is that in the PD zone, there are some aspirational ideas that are granted, but it really does provide some flexibility to deviate from core zoning ordinance requirements. But it doesn't reset different requirements, if that makes sense.
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell.
Is it appropriate to start with opinions and, moving forward past questions?
Sure.
If so,
Yeah.
In the beginning, I asked staff about what specific concerns were raised regarding this subdivision as well as the flexibility that's being granted. Because otherwise, we wouldn't be here, and this would just be permitted by right.
Right.
And so I made sure to note down any comments that related or even potentially related to those deviations. And my personal opinion is that what staff has proposed and what the applicant has offered to do in terms of additional conditions of approval more than adequately mitigate those concerns. And I am prepared to support it with all the items that Director Ford listed.
Commissioner Mulder.
I would agree with Commissioner Mitchell there, as there's a drainage plan. The applicant offered to do the down blinds on the two-story windows. There's a landscaping plan coming forward. The applicant has offered, if the RMA fails, to contribute their impact on Gwynn Road. And also, going towards, the other thing is the RENA numbers and the housing numbers. That was a really good question earlier on, so looking at the housing aspect. And then also in questions, I believe staff said there could have been 75 units principally permitted, and at 61 if I'm reading.
Maybe 79, I thought.
So, yeah, and then I'm seeing 61 here. So if you think in terms of traffic, I feel that the applicant has mitigated those concerns, and with the extra conditions of approval, with adding that the director has, adding the comment about the impact on Gwynn Road if the RMA fails, I would be in support of a motion if someone wanted to. I'll make that motion then.
One last thing I would bring up, I checked off all my concerns with the exception of the applicant mentioned CC&Rs in terms of if any of the parcels were sold, that they'd have to be operated consistent with how they plan to. And if he's offering it, Director, if we just said CCNRs as a requirement for the final map subdivision, could you add that to your list?
Working on it, yep.
Okay. Thanks. So that was a motion from you?
That was a motion, and I heard an amendment from you requesting the CCNRs.
Is that all right?
Oh, yeah.
I'll second it.
I have a couple of clarifying questions about the different amendments before I'd like to. Okay.
Okay, sure. And just to be clear, you were making a motion to approve with the recommended conditions of staff plus the additional conditions that the director read.
Yeah. Yes, with the conditions, because if we don't add the conditions in there that the director added, then it doesn't mitigate the concerns we heard
Exactly.
in the comments,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Did you also?
We do have a motion and a second, but we're going to discuss it.
Technically an amended motion.
I want to discuss the motion.
Yeah, I think Commissioner West wants to discuss the motion, and we'll see if we need to clarify or amend the motion.
Just questions about the motion. Okay, so in your motion and the proposed amendments, did you include the clarification about the road and the applicant being responsible for a percentage of the road maintenance based on impact?
The director was typing that out,
Okay,
and I
great.
think he could probably put it up on the screen if we wanted clarification, possibly.
Why don't we go and I'll pull this up and you can look at what I've got so far and consider whether this addresses all the issues. So the following are requirements of the planned unit development. That really hasn't changed. The design of the enclosure shall be such that it does not conflict with traffic circulation. And then, other than what you've seen before, I added in a sentence, alternatives to speed bumps may be used instead of speed bumps or in lieu of speed bumps if they are determined to be more effective, subject to review and approval by Public Works. If, in the event the applicant is unable to form an RMA, the applicant shall contribute their fair share of improvements to Gwynn Road by making improvements to the condition of Gwynn Road based upon a cost estimate from a licensed engineer. And then prior to recordation of the final map, the applicant shall create a homeowners association with CCNRs to maintain the common areas and Jack Road.
Commissioner West.
We had a couple of requests from the applicant that I don't see in our proposed amendments, and I know we have a motion on the floor, but I am interested in discussing the request from the applicant.
Feel free. Yeah, we can see if we want to add that to the.
And I think it's. There are, I'll just read them out real quick for everyone to be on the same page. We would like to request that we be able to phase the project, and then we would like to ask for flexibility on the size of the proposed buildings. He lists specific ones, and changing the width of the buildings.
I thought the
I thought we
phased.
were adding those in the conditions, or did?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were read into, or at least a phasing was read into the conditions earlier. I think the thing, and I thought we addressed the 80-foot building width too.
If I may, Mr. Valadeo late today asked about having flexibility on not just the width of the buildings, but the height and also the location of the buildings in relation to the footprints you see on the PDP map. I think that's the universe of flexible items in addition to the phasing request.
And thank you for clarifying. I think we've just had a lot of different wording flying around. Is that currently in our list of considerations for approval, as Mr. Lazar is saying?
I'm adding it right now.
Okay.
I was under the impression that was already in the
Part of it was.
the supplemental received, so that was part of my original motion, or my intent of the original motion. The only thing I would like to clarify when it comes to the road part is it says report by a licensed engineer. I just want to make sure that we clarify it's the applicant or the development's impact. So that way, if for some reason someone else looked at that and said all of a sudden they have to repair all of Gwynn Road, I don't think that would be fair to the applicant. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, it was, the intent would be what's the trip generation, the number of trips that are coming from this property, and then in relationship to, you know, what the cost of, say, a year's maintenance would be, what percentage of that.
Okay. I just want to make sure we clarified that. So.
And finally, and I don't even think this requires any change of wording, because you indicate some flexibility around what traffic calming measures might be effective in lieu of speed bumps. But I might just sort of say, and or in addition to speed bumps, so that, you know, maybe it's feasible, maybe it's not, to narrow the road lanes, but that wouldn't necessarily mean you don't have speed bumps, okay? But other than that, I think that's, I've got nothing more. Now, can the motion maker and the motion seconder stipulate that this additional discussion that we've just gotten into that is part of the motion?
With the head nodding, I believe that's an agreement the whole time.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that before we vote?
I am a resident of a planned unit development in McKinleyville, and if it weren't for the flexibility given to the other developments in the county, I probably wouldn't own my own home right now. And there are, you know, issues with tight garbage cans, and, you know, parking isn't bountiful, but it all works, and people that otherwise wouldn't have a place to live do. And so I hear and feel for the folks that have lived in a single family residential area for a while, but this has been there probably when you bought your home as zoned for multifamily, and unfortunately it changed owners, and that's part of the process. And I regret that there will be impacts, but I believe this is what's best for everybody.
Okay. And with that, I guess I'll call for a roll call vote on the motion.
Ivor Skobdal,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Lonix Landry,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
No.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Sarah West.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. I do thank all of you who came out. I'm sorry that we could not give more of what you were asking for, but we appreciate your input, and we tried to do what we could around the edges.
That's
All right, well, with that, guys, it's late, and let's see what we can get to. We have at least one more, we have one more residential subdivision next on the agenda. That would be the Rufino final map subdivision and coastal development permit. Mr. Lazar, are you also presenting that one? Okay. Then I guess we'll, by the way, does anybody have any quick ex parte disclosures about that one? I do not. So if there aren't any, then we'll just ask Mr. Lazar to make his presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully it'll show up soon. Okay, so this is going to be a much briefer presentation. This is a major subdivision like the last one in that it involves more than 4 parcels being proposed. And it is in the coastal zone, so it also involves a coastal development permit. Oh, it looks like Let me see if I can get the, well, we'll just keep going. Okay, so 6 parcels are proposed. You can see the tentative map here. It has a cul-de-sac design, and the parcels range in size. The parcel being divided is 3.87 acres, and it will be 18,000, the smallest parcel, to 35,000 square feet in size. This is showing the location of the property. You can see it's on the west side of Highway 101, south of School Road on Anderson. It takes access off of Anderson, which is a public road. Here's a map of the zoning and general plan land use designations. You can see the parcel is zoned RS20. That's residential single family with a 20,000 square foot minimum parcel size. The land use designation is residential estates with a density of 0 to 2 units per acre. This is a view of the tentative map. This was originally a little bit of there was an additional parcel, but due to some constraints, we had to adjust with the applicant to make some room. However, all the parcels meet the minimum parcel size prescribed under the zoning. And then this is an overlay of the tentative map. You can see the current conditions. There was a biological survey done of the property. Fish and Wildlife visited the parcel. There's a condition concerning nesting bird habitat if there's vegetation removal that occurs during the nesting season. Otherwise, I wanted to bring to your attention, we did receive a few neighborhood concerns about this project, specifically with respect to the lack of sidewalk facilities in the vicinity. Going back to the prior slide, you can see that with the proposal, we will have a sidewalk along the south side of the proposed access road, and it will circle around the cul-de-sac. There will also be sidewalks installed along Anderson Avenue on the property's frontage. However, that is the extent of sidewalks that are being developed, and it should be noted that there are no sidewalks at this time on Anderson Avenue. This is a view of Anderson. You can see there's a 40-foot right-of-way. However, the road is not improved to the full width of the right-of-way. This is another view. And lastly, here's a view of the frontage of the parcel. This would be improved. The right-of-way would be widened, and sidewalks would be installed as part of this project, but that would be the end of it. Like the project we had earlier, we are recommending use of the 15183 CEQA exemption because of the parcel's density that's proposed and the fact that the McKinleyville area was considered under the general plan, our most recent housing element, and is covered by a prior environmental impact report that was prepared. So we are recommending approval of the project. We believe it meets all of the requirements of the code, and the conditions effectively address any localized concerns. And there's always alternatives that you can consider, such as denial or requiring further environmental review. However, we believe that that is unnecessary. So I'm going to keep my presentation brief since there's certainly other items on the agenda, and I'm open to answering questions.
Any questions at this time for Mr. Ozar before we take public comment? Commissioner Scavdell.
I saw that there's a detention basin, but I didn't see where it was located. Is that determined later after they do the drainage study, or?
It's a known thing. It would be in the northeast corner of the property.
I think it's at parcel 6.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, well then, I will go to public comment. Is the applicant or their agent here? I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, I see a hand on Zoom. I don't know if that is the applicant. It is Zach Johnson. Okay. If that's the case, then I'll begin with Zoom and with Zach Johnson. You are entitled to up to 15 minutes, but I certainly don't think you need to take that long, but you can make a presentation to begin public comment, sir. Go ahead.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Zach Johnson. I work with Whitchurch Engineering. I am the agent and the designer for the Rafinas for this project. And again, it's kind of late. Through this Valadeo meeting, hearing a bunch of concerns from the community. And I don't know how many of those would actually apply in this location. Just to be clear, I've lived up here about 20 years. I currently live off Cliff Avenue, so this project is right in my neighborhood. I think this is a really good use of space. We have some nice open parcels that really do match the surrounding area. So I think that this development fits very nicely in the region. Let's see, we've got water and sewer right at the road. We've got ample power. We've done everything that we can to potentially open up future development of the parcels at the north in case that they want to subdivide. Other than that, I don't think that we are really having much of an effect on any of the neighboring parcels, except for the fact that there are going to be a few new homes, which does, generate a little bit more traffic. We feel that Anderson Road as well as School Road are ample to, handle any of this additional traffic. We've got no real drainage issues that can't be mitigated through the use of a detention pond. I know that both the owners, I can't really speak too much for them. I don't know if they're actually listening right now, but the owners have a landscaping company and are interested in, just beautifying the project and not making this just kind of a cash cow for themselves. Other than that, I don't really know what else to say for this. I am very open to hearing both from the council and from anybody that might have any additional comments.
If any commissioners has a question right now for Ms. Johnson, you can ask now. We can also just ask you to be available after public comment when we get into our discussion if we have additional questions.
Absolutely.
I didn't understand the cash cow reference there.
No, I don't know. I was out digging holes in Humboldt all day, so my brain is just a little bit gone. I mean, I guess we are trying to leave the parcels nice and open to create nice open yards and not absolutely, maximize this, just because that's not consistent with the neighborhood. If this was...
Thank you. I understand the clarification now.
Old Town Eureka or anything like that, where we're trying to just absolutely maximize every square foot, that would be one thing, but this is a nice country setting, and I know that the owners are
okay, no, we understand. Thank you, though, for that clarification. Okay, I'm going to now, unless there's any immediate questions for the agent, I'm going to invite other public comment, starting with the people in the room. Is there anyone here in person who wishes to comment on the Rufino project? Okay, seeing none, I will close in-person public comment. Anyone else on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on the Rufino project? Okay, then seeing no hands there, we will close public comment, but reserve the right to ask additional questions if necessary to the agent. But I'll now bring it back to the commission. Commissioner West.
Sorry, I do have a question for staff. Okay, so looking at the agenda link, there is a link to public comment that takes you to a comment about the Valadeo subdivision from Carol Huey.
Yeah.
And that was, did I miss it? That's just a boo-boo?
That was misfiled.
Okay. Is there any public comment that we should be considering that was submitted for this one?
Excuse me, through the chair, there was public comment. It was, I believe, it was intended to be included.
Susan Frankie?
Correct.
Just that one, though?
Yes, and I did meet with a woman and her son at the counter earlier this week, and I tried to summarize the concern, which was the lack of sidewalks and the pedestrian safety that comes as a result of that.
Right.
Otherwise, no objections to the proposal itself.
That was an important comment, and I'm not as familiar with the site because I didn't visit it in person, but I understand that sidewalks along Anderson are part of this project, offsite improvements, and how extensive are those sidewalks going to be?
They wouldn't be offsite. They're frontage improvements that are proposed as part of the project, but that is the limit of sidewalks that are proposed.
Okay, it is just the frontage along these parcels.
And the new road to be developed within the interior of the parcel.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner West.
Just for the clarification of the record, I wanted to note that I did find Susan Frankie's comment in my packet. So.
Good, thanks. Commissioner Skapdal?
Just curious, are there any noise mitigation requirements related to the impact of Highway 101 on these parcels, or do we just leave that to the landowners to mitigate
There are
themselves?
requirements in the McKinleyville plan, and it's a little outdated now. It was projecting noise levels in 2020, but the idea would be that if necessary, you provide fencing or a hedge to break down the sound so that at the exterior of the buildings, it doesn't exceed the 65 decibel threshold because of the attenuation expected by the houses themselves.
You're saying there's an expectation that the developer would be required to comply with that?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thoughts? How are we feeling about this one?
So what you're saying is where it fronts up along 101, there should be some, I think for safety, not just sound, they should be required to have a concrete fence. I don't know if that's going to be required by anyone else, like Caltrans or something, but cars do run off the freeway.
Was that a question for staff?
That is something that if you find that what the community plan calls for is not sufficient, that you can require.
Turn my mic off. I think that it should be required that they have adequate concrete block fencing to protect those homes. I know my grandmother lived along a highway and a car went almost to her bedroom.
Commissioner Mitchell?
I've seen other such dangerous, placement. Instead of having a whole fence, it was just, concrete pillars that go up high enough to prevent the cars from getting through. And it seems like as long as there was something, it wouldn't have to be a fence, and that could be up to the developer and the county to decide.
I don't think you're talking about much fence, but for safety, for sound, and, security, people walking along the highway, there should be something. And I don't know if Caltrans has recommendations or requirements.
I was just thinking about cost and keeping it down, but
These aren't gonna be cheap homes, I don't think.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Lazar answer. I do see that Zach Johnson had raised his hand as well.
Yeah.
I thought maybe he wanted to.
I wanted to clarify something earlier. We did receive a noise study, and I'm looking at it closely here now, and it does say that to meet the outdoor noise standard for a usable area of 200 square feet, a 5 decibel reduction is required, and that the parcels adjacent to the eastern border, aka the ones closest to the freeway, that placing the usable 200 square feet of the west will receive adequate attenuation from the structures and landscaping. So it seems like the engineering is suggesting that there will be enough reduction by the landscaping alone. However, that doesn't get to the concerns of the safety from stray vehicles. So I think that's a different matter.
That's not clear to me. You're saying placing the structures 200 feet to the west of the freeway?
Not the structures, that there was. Let me look a little closer while the commissioner.
Because the lot's
deliberates.
only, I mean.
No,
just
it's not
saying-
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
perhaps Mr. Johnson, who
Yeah.
I believe prepared this, could clarify
Yes,
that for
I
us.
do see your hand up, Mr. Johnson, so go ahead. Perhaps you can speak to this issue. Mr. Johnson, I think you're unmuted.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can, yeah, now.
Yeah, I completed the noise study, and of course, Highway 101 generates some noise. Basically, by moving the structures just slightly off the property line, and with standard construction methods, the structures themselves should be more than adequate to mitigate any noise down to the required levels. In addition to that, the owners have suggested the option of placing a low earthen berm along the east side of the parcel and then planting that with something like alder or spruce. They were hoping to do that just for aesthetics and such, but also to help mitigate some noise. I would assume after, even a year or so, those trees, as long as in addition to the swale that's running between the highway and the property, would be adequate to keep any car that went careening off the road from making it too far into the property.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments?
I'm prepared to move forward with the motion if there's no further discussion.
I don't see anybody else raising their
Okay.
hand.
Then I would move approval of the item as recommended, except for the clarification that the berm and the trees mentioned by the applicant be added as conditions of approval.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Landry. Any further discussion on that motion? I guess we'll have a roll call vote then, please.
Ivor Skobdal,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Lonix Landry,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
and Sarah West.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Rafino Major Subdivision is approved with recommended conditions. Okay, thank you for those of you who have waited to reach the point in the agenda when we return to the STR ordinance. Commissioner Mitchell, you have your hand up. Sorry, Mulder, my apologies.
So, seeing that it's almost 9:15 on the calendar, and we usually have a 9:30 stop, being as I started my day at 3:30 this morning, I have a hard stop at 9:30. I'm walking out that door and driving home.
Understood. It's not obviously enough time to do a comprehensive treatment of this. I guess what I was thinking is, but we could just do public comment. We have a number of folks who've waited in the room, or at least some who've waited in the room, I think, to do so, and I'll begin with them. Then if there's time, we can perhaps get through anyone on Zoom who wishes to comment, and we will have to continue this to another meeting, and we'll discuss that when we get there. But yes, if I could, would it be your suggestion that we just go straight to public comment, or do you need to make a brief presentation first?
I would suggest you go to just public comment, since that seems to be what you're offering, is to allow the people who are here to comment on it, and then we can just address what we've done in the policy decision that is before the commission.
Oh, okay, sure. Let's begin with public comment then. Those who may wish to make a comment, are there any folks in the room who wish to comment? Yeah, I'm opening the public hearing on the draft short-term rental ordinance.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, members of the commission and department staff. My name is Seth Naiman. I'm a longtime resident of Humboldt County, and I raised both my sons here. We operate a short-term rental in the county, and the income from that rental has helped me raise my sons. We support the 2% cap and the 5 limit maximum for units as proposed or already approved. For your upcoming decision, I urge you to allow short-term rentals on the premises of the primary residence of an operator, and that these rentals not count towards the 2% cap. This will allow homeowners on their primary residence to operate short-term rentals in order to earn needed income. We would also like to thank the commission for your decision at the last meeting to allow sub-areas within the county to be greater than the 2% of the housing stock in those sub-areas of short-term rentals. And this decision was very important because Redwood National Park receives 1.5 million visitors annually. And there is just simply more demand for lodging closer to the park. That's just the way it is. One room at the airport at the Holiday Inn costs $300 a night in the tourist season. So having short-term rentals available for the economically important tourism industry is better for tourists, and it's better for Humboldt County. Maybe you could even stay in a treehouse if you come for a visit. The hotel industry, I do want to make you aware, I did say this at the last meeting, the hotel industry through the American Hotel Lobbying Association and other groups are actively lobbying county commissioners and other individuals like yourself through quote-unquote neighborhood groups. One of these persons spoke at the last meeting. They're leveraging the housing shortage largely caused by a lack of building and increases in demand and lack of land as evidence of the role of short-term rentals in California's housing crisis. This has been well documented in a 2017 New York Times article that you can look up. You can Google it online. Short-term rentals like mine support families throughout the county, which keeps more money in our local economy and supports local families, cleaning staff, landscapers, more so than the corporate hotel industry. And they're better for tourism, too. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hi, I feel you all know me by now. This is Danny Ferguson, and I just been sitting here listening to all these meetings and taking notes of things I want to make comments on based on what discussions that you all were having based on different issues. One of the things I want to talk about is the community area planning zones. I agree with the 2% in the county overall, but I don't think any one planning area should have more than a set amount, maybe 20%. Otherwise, I'm afraid that all of West Haven and Trinidad will become all of the 2% for the entire county. And I don't think that would be good for anybody, and I'm pro vacation rental. The other thing I wanted to mention is possibly more of a property share. Like you have home share, property share. So if you're a homeowner and you live on your property and somebody isn't sleeping in your living room or bedroom, whatever it is, sharing your toilet, we should be able to have a little bit more flexibility than people who are having their properties managed by vacation rental companies or by Vacasa or any of, aren't on site. When we're on site, it makes a huge difference. And in that vein, the idea of having to have every single one of I'm booked 100%. So I've got, a lot of people in my place. Most stay 2 nights because there's no kitchen. So to have everybody be required to sign a rental agreement like I do with my long-term tenants, which I have 8 of, I just think that's a bit cumbersome for both us and for the person who's coming to stay with us. And I think that that would be a really good tool for the planning department to have in their pocket to require of people who have problems. If you have a vacation rental and people are speeding on your road and creating problems on your road and they're complaining to John, then they should be the ones that have to be forced to deal with that cumbersome amount of paperwork, rather than people who are doing well, there's no issue. So to put that on all 2% is, I think, a bit much to ask of anybody. And the other one I have, you had mentioned 5 acres can have more than 1 unit. You could have 2 per 5 acres. I'm on 4.78 acres. I have 2 on my property. So I think maybe it should be more of a, 1 per acre up to 2 or 1 per acre up to the limit, so that there isn't more, because what difference does it make? 1 acre is a lot of land. So, you know, I mean, look at how many houses you're putting on 1 acre in McKinleyville. I mean, this is nothing to have two, you know, so it should be more based on 1 acre rather than you have to have this big of a parcel. So those are the biggest things that I wanted to mention. Thank you for your time and all your effort in this whole process. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi again, Tom Wheeler, representing the Redwood Coalition for Climate and Environmental Responsibility. We're experiencing a housing affordability crisis in Humboldt County. At its root is ultimately a problem of housing supply. We simply don't have enough housing units to meet our demand, which is driving costs up for both home purchasers and renters. Tonight's earlier discussion about the Valadeo subdivision illustrates just how hard it is to get housing built in our community. We cannot treat lightly actions that are going to reduce our existing housing stock. While there are various causes to the problem of our housing supply shortage, tonight we are discussing short-term rentals. If we look at the data for the past 10 years, the number of homes built in those past 10 years are fewer than the number that have been lost to short-term rentals. We are losing housing because of short-term rentals. The proposed cap on STRs still allow too much of our county's housing to be redirected from residents to short-term visitors to the area. So Rocker joins the comprehensive recommendations put forward by our friends at Better Neighbors LA on how this ordinance can be improved. Particularly, I'd like to highlight limiting the total number of STRs to 1% or below of our total existing housing stock. Thank you. Thank you. Any others? Yes, sir, come on up.
Carl Ferguson. I hadn't planned on speaking, but after he spoke, I felt I need to speak. I think some of the numbers he's giving are extremely misleading. You can't just take the number of vacation rentals that are on the market, take that number and say that's how many houses have been removed from the market. It's not true at all, not even close. Many of the units that are being used are secondary units in your properties. They're not all tree houses. I'm just saying there's a lot of them that are second units. They're never going to be part of the housing stock. There's all kinds of places that are people's houses that they don't even live here most of the year, and they're putting in vacation rentals when they're not there. Those are going to be part of the housing stocks. The idea that every housing that you can find on Airbnb or VRBO is taken away housing is completely and utterly false. It's not. I just want to make that point that that's just not where we're losing all of our housing. You're losing all your housing more to people like the people in the meeting earlier. They're not in my backyard people that don't want to have this housing in places that seem extremely appropriate for it, and people are complaining about it. So I think it's more a matter of building more housing, not blaming it all on our vacation rentals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room wishing to comment on this issue? If not, I am going to close in-person public comment, but I will go now to Zoom and phone. Anyone still with us on Zoom or phone, please raise your hand if you're wishing to comment on this item. I see one hand raised at present, but I just want to say again, anyone else there who is wishing and planning to speak, please do raise your hand so we know how many we'll have. The first hand up is Neil Cleveland. We can go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about transferability. Alternative 1 supports transition from parent to children. My situation is unique, and with that, I'm seeking further clarification. In my case, my wife and I own the subject property under an S-Corp that's been in existence since 1980. This S-Corp has been owned by my wife and I for over 40 years. It's a small-held company, and the stock is owned by my wife and I. We purchased a property with the intent to sell it to my son and daughter-in-law. The property includes a main house and a fully operational ADU SDR that has been operating for several years. The usage has been compliant, and we did all the necessary certificates and fees and satisfied that. Once a proposed ordinance is adopted, we will comply with the ordinance. Our intent and original plan remains to help our son and daughter-in-law and 3 grandchildren purchase property and continue to live in Trinidad as they have been for long-term residents as tenants in Trinidad for 20 years. Eventually, we would will be transferring the property of my son and daughter-in-law, who will live in the main residence and will operate the STR. And with that, we be able to afford housing costs with our help with them purchasing it. At this time, would like to clarify, does parent and to children, would this count with my S Corp, since my wife and I are the sole owners of it? Our whole purpose is to get our children into a house and that they can handle the costs. I'd love to hear the clarification on that. Is my type of ownership going to be permitted? Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go now to Becca Ayala. And again, last call for anyone else on Zoom or phone who wishes to comment. Please do raise your hand. Becca Ayala, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Becca Ayala, and I'm a policy analyst and advocate at Better Neighbors LA, a coalition of host tenants, housing activists, and community members. At Better Neighbors, we conduct data analysis and research on the short-term rental industry in the coastal zone and its impact on coastal communities. We urge the Humboldt County Planning Commission to amend the proposed ordinance to permit only true home sharing and hosted short-term rentals within Humboldt County's coastal zone. A hosted-only policy is the best way to balance the preservation of affordable housing and coastal public access. Cities like Santa Monica and West Hollywood have adopted hosted-only policies. Currently, the city of Pismo Beach is looking to adopt regulations to reduce the number of short-term rentals over time. However, should the Planning Commission decide not to adopt regulations limited to true home sharing, we request that the Commission lower the cap of short-term rentals to 1% of the housing stock without any neighborhood exemptions to safeguard communities against an overconcentration of short-term rentals. We also ask the Commission to permit a single individual or business to own only one parcel with a short-term rental. While we are heartened the Commission reduced the per-person permit allowance from 5 to 3 at the last meeting, we still believe the best way to protect existing housing is to only allow 1 permit per individual. Finally, we urge the Commission to prohibit short-term rentals from operating within multifamily structures. 40% of households in Humboldt County are renter-occupied. Multifamily structures are often more affordable housing options that should be preserved for long-term tenants like service and agricultural workers who are vital to Humboldt's economy. In Humboldt County, rents have increased $250 since 2015, while the number of unhosted short-term rentals have increased 25% since 2022 alone in the coastal zone. According to the October 5th staff report, in the coastal zone, 225 unhosted short-term rentals currently occupy housing stock that may otherwise be available to long-term tenants or potential homeowners. A policy limited to true home sharing is a step towards preserving existing housing stock for long-term use and coastal access. Furthermore, the Coastal Commission has passed strong and balanced short-term rental regulations. Most recently, they approved the City of Half Moon Bay's regulations that included a primary residence requirement on both hosted and unhosted short-term rentals, along with a 60-night cap on the number of nights an unhosted rental may be rented annually. As another coastal jurisdiction, Humboldt County has the opportunity to preserve access to housing for residents and maintain coastal public access through true home sharing. For these reasons, Better Neighbors urges the Commission to pursue a hosted-only policy, and if not, reduce the cap to 1% of the housing stock without neighborhood exemptions, limit 1 permit per individual, and restrict short-term rentals from operating in multifamily structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ayala. I do see one other hand up on phone. That's Public 7179. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Star 6 to unmute.
Hello, Planning Commission. I would like to address STRs as a whole and claim that it's not too late to ban STRs in Humboldt County. Please ask yourselves, why allow STRs in Humboldt County at all? I've attended a few of these meetings, I call Humboldt County my home, and I tell others that it's a special place. But it is highly unlikely that Humboldt County is going to be exempt from the Airbnb effect. This phenomenon occurs that STRs raise rents and housing prices since residential homes are now being viewed as lucrative businesses. And according to a Forbes article on the Airbnb effect, a healthy housing market is the better off of a healthy economy, not the profit margins of an STR operator. The two major arguments for STRs that I've heard during these meetings are, this is my property and I have the right to do what I want on it. I would like to challenge this claim by stating if property owners were allowed to do whatever they wanted on their properties, then my neighbor could run a tiny nuclear power plant in his front yard while eating a bald eagle sandwich. So please disregard that argument. The second argument is about how personal financial benefit can only be attained through STRs. I don't know the specific details of the people making these claims, but I do know that there are, in fact, multiple ways of making money, one being long-term rentals. Also, there are not a lot of housing options for people wanting to live here, and I don't see how allowing STRs is going to make that any better. In fact, it will most likely involve forced economic displacement of some current long-term renters and prevent potential ones from moving to Humboldt. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and seeing no other hands up on Zoom or phone, I am going to close public comment on this item. Yes, Commissioner Mulder.
I apologize, but I'm going to leave you guys. Last time I stayed past a half an hour, I woke up on the rumble strip about 25 minutes from home, so I'm out.
Absolutely. We're just going to figure out how to wrap these up and how to continue them on. Yeah, safe travels. So I don't think we have time to get into any discussion. So the question is, do we just continue the remainder of the agenda to the November 30th meeting?
That would be staff's recommendation, yes.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask if are there other things that are on that agenda that this will be stacking up with?
There are other things on the agenda, and things will be stacking up. But it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. I mean, the only other.
Could I also recommend that before you continue this, that you did close the public hearing, correct?
I closed the
Or
public comment
Right.
period, and that I just want to be clear to anyone who is watching out there that we will not then take public comment, but we will continue with the public hearing post-public comment. Is that?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, that's what I intended to do.
Would it be-
Commissioner Mitchell.
Would it be possible to set a time certain for this discussion or put it at the beginning of the meeting?
We'll put this on first.
Okay, so then what we have remaining on tonight's agenda that we need to continue, we've already moved the sign ordinance to December 14th. We have the continuation of this short-term rental ordinance, and we also have the JDS construction special permit and the Georgy Stoyanov special permit, correct?
That is correct.
Can I just leave my papers for the JDS?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I make that motion?
What's that?
Can I make that motion?
So
Yeah.
is this gonna be like one of the first ones?
It is.
So we won't have to sit through 3.5 hours again?
What we're planning to do, if the director agrees, is we'll put the short-term rental ordinance first, and then then the two I just named will be immediately after that. So it won't be at the very start of the meeting, and I apologize that you waited all this time for nothing, but
Okay, and what's that date again, please?
November 30th, 2 weeks from today.
I'd like to move that we continue the remaining items to November 30th at the beginning of the meeting.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Landry, that we continue these items and that these three items will go first after consent on the next meeting. Any other discussion, or can we vote on that? All in favor of that motion? Mitchell made the motion, Landry seconded. And we are continuing them to the next meeting, and they're putting these three items first. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So unanimously approves to continue those items. And with that, we will adjourn unless there's any burning need for a staff report. Okay, thanks. Thanks all. See you in 2 weeks, and have a nice Thanksgiving.